Hello and welcome to the Uncultured Nerd Show. My name is Maven, I'm an uncultured nerd, but one of the big areas which I would like to become more cultured in is animation. I've always loved animation. Of course, growing up, I watched a lot of animated films and cartoons, but as I've grown up more, I've gotten more into adult animation and the behind the scenes of animated films. And I've found it all really fascinating. And with the Academy Awards coming up, I figured what better way to force myself to become more cultured while trying to do something topical than to watch every single best animated short winner. Why short and not feature? Because shorts are easier to watch and analyze than features. Or at least that's what I thought, because I assumed the animated short category wouldn't be much older than the animated feature category, which only appeared in 2001. How wrong I was! Turns out the first animated short Oscar was awarded at only the 5th ceremony, making the category almost 94 years old. Meaning I've got 93 winners to look at. This is going to be one hell of a ride, so join me as we watch every Best Animated Short Oscar winner. Okay, first ever winner, and surprise, surprise, it's Disney! Actually, the entire 1930s was won by Disney. He had a bit of a monopoly on mainstream animation at the time. Flowers and Trees was one of the 3 nominees in the 1931-1932 ceremony, alongside another Disney short, Mickey's Orphans, and a Warner Brothers produced short, It's Got Me Again. Flowers and Trees is the day in the life of a bunch of anthropomorphic vegetation, which gets a little hairy when one old tree gets jealous and decides to light everything up. Despite the short being almost 100 years old, the animation is still gorgeous. You can really see the amount of detail in every single hand-drawn frame. It's incredible what they were able to do with just a pen and paper. And yes, I know there were probably other fancy equipment involved, but I'm uncultured, I don't know, so I'm just gonna say they had a pen and paper. Although Disney is pretty well known for making anthropomorphic animals, apparently early on they also did plants. And am I crazy, or is that lady tree making me think things? So yeah, her design is very pretty, but by far my favorite design and favorite overall character is the villain tree. Having a snake for his tongue, that's just so cool. You can really see his design in future Disney films, especially Snow White. Also, he's a really fun villain. Given the lack of dialogue and the time restriction, we're not getting much complexity here. Very black and white, good versus evil, and a bit of a dumb plan. I mean, you are also made of wood. You will also burn. In fact, you're the only one who actually does burn. But classic villain comeuppance destroyed by your own ambition. Overall, this is a very non-complicated, extremely simple short. But it gets a lot of points for being the first and for standing the test of time. I mean, this animation is still so gorgeous. Flowers and Trees won't change your world, but if you want to see where this category started, definitely give it a watch. Next up for the 1932-1933 ceremony, the 3 little pigs took home the trophy. Do I even need to tell you the story? Well, actually, despite how famous the 3 pigs is, it's one of those fairy tales I'm always interested to see new versions of, because I'm always curious which variation they're going to do. Of course, there's always 3 pigs who build 3 houses, 1 out of hay, 1 sticks, and 1 bricks. A wolf comes along and blows down 2, but can't blow down the 3rd. We learn the moral of working a little harder to build something better. But a few details often change between versions, most notably, who makes it to the end. In some versions, everyone survives, but in others, the only one to live is the 3rd pig, who ends up making a stew out of the wolf that ate his 2 brothers. I was curious if Disney would go the darker route, as it was a lot darker in the earlier days. However, it seems this was going for more kid-friendly, so while there is legit tension during the wolf chase scenes, they're not trying to scare the kids too much. You always know the pigs are going to make it out fine, but with those story analyses out of the way, how's everything else? Well, the animation has moved on from anthropomorphizing vegetation to anthropomorphizing animals. It's clear why plants were what they started with. Those designs were a lot more simple, and these designs have a lot more details and expressive faces to get right. And I think they do a really good job. Personally, I think while the pigs are cute and fun to watch, the real star is the wolf. Even though it's always really clear that the pigs are going to be fine, this thing has some real presence on screen. I'm not sure if there was a villain animation cycle they used for him and the tree in the previous short, but the way they both move just screams villain. And I can't talk about this short without mentioning the song. I'm pretty sure everyone knows this song. They may not even know the origin, but the melody is very earwormy, and I wouldn't call it too annoying. I just wouldn't put it on anytime soon.
Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? Big bad wolf, big bad wolf.
As a retelling of the classic tale, it's fine. Personally, my favorite versions of the story take drastically different approaches. My personal favorite is a book version by David Weissner, where the pigs are literally blown out of the story and run around to different fairy tales. It's quite a fun read. If you're an animation buff and want to see some really early Disney work, I'd give it a watch, but I wouldn't say it's anything that special. The Tortoise and the Hare came home with the win in 1934, and again, do I even need to tell you the story? The short follows the classic fable beat for beat, but there are a few additions to pad out the running time. The original fable barely has enough story for 4 minutes, and this short stretches to double that, which is my main problem with this one. Despite being only 8 minutes, it somehow feels padded and like it's stalling for time. It does make sense. The original pretty much has 4 scenes: start the race, hare takes a nap, tortoise passes him, tortoise wins. This one adds 3 extra scenes in the middle and a very drawn-out climax, all of which do feel kinda tacked on. I'll admit at first I did like the addition because it took something established and turned it on its head. We all expect the hare to fall asleep once, the tortoise to pass, and that's it. Here the hare wakes up and passes the tortoise again, so we immediately are thrown into the unknown. Even though we know the story, something new has happened, so where's it going now? Into quite boring territory. I'm not sure what they could have done to make this more interesting, cause I just don't know how you can pad out a traditional telling of this fable to much longer than 5 minutes without getting repetitive. And that is what this sports section feels like, very repetitive. Looney Tunes has done a few different Tortoise and the Hare shorts, and they are very good, mostly because it's one of the few times you see Bugs lose it. Bugs goes really nuts in these 3 shorts, and they don't feel padded at all because of all the additional humor. So I think that's maybe what this short was missing, a lot more humor. I can only think of one joke I laughed at, and it was this visual gag with the skunks. Aside from that, it kinda just felt like stuff happened and then it ended. So yeah, not a glowing endorsement, but it's not terrible. It's still bright, colorful, and the animation is on par with the other 3 shorts. But for me, I'm not eager to watch it again. The trophy went to 3 Orphan Kittens in 1935, a tale of 3 orphan kittens who find their way into a fancy house and get into some shenanigans. And for this one, well, it was only a matter of time before we got to something that didn't age great. This is one of those cartoons which is prefaced by Leonard Maltin in modern releases to explain the context of the time and why this stereotype was used, and that it is being shown in full so we can learn from the past and not repeat the same mistakes in the future. Watch his intro because he talks a lot better about it than I ever could. So aside from that, honestly, I'm not a big fan of this one. Not even really because of the uncomfortable moments, but mostly because it's not very creative like Flowers and Trees. It's more just trying to be cute. And yeah, the kittens are cute and their shenanigans, I guess, also cute, but not mind-blowingly cute. And because the cuteness is the main focus, the slapstick isn't very good. Good slapstick is funny when the characters get hurt. These are pretty much Tom and Jerry slapstick setups with the milk jar, the tablecloth, and the piano, but since they are going for cute over funny, it all just feels very safe. So, along with the fact that this gets very collar-tugging, I'd probably skip this one. The next year came Country Cousin, which had a very similar setup to 3 Orphan Kittens, with a country mouse visiting his cousin in the city and getting into shenanigans in a fancy house. And while this one I think is slightly better and gratifyingly absent of collar tugging, it's still not really my thing. I actually got kind of annoyed at this one because of the city mouse. He is such a dick to his cousin to the point where it actually got me annoyed in real life. All he does is shush his cousin and berate him for not doing anything right. Why not tell him the rules before he comes, you jerk? Like I said, I do think this was an improvement over the kittens, as they use a very similar premise of fish out of water causing havoc, but this one isn't trying as hard to keep the characters super cute, so the slapstick humor is a bit better. Gotta love a mouse getting drunk. The umbrella in the bread bit did make me laugh, but I do keep going back to what a dick the city mouse was. He insults his cousin while inviting him over to what he claims is a much better life, and all he does is shush him while not telling him the rules of what to do to stay alive. And also leaving his cousin to be eaten. He did not try hard enough to keep him from fighting that cat. I guess this is a mildly enjoyable watch, but if you want to see a cat and mouse cartoon, just watch Tom and Jerry. Okay, back on track, thank goodness. The old mill is right out of Fantasia. This little slice of life inside this abandoned windmill is simple yet thrilling and amazingly beautiful. It starts very calm and serene with pond animals creating the music right along with the score and eventually the wind joining in, which is actually my favorite bit in the short. I loved how in the beginning it was playful and the next time it happens, it's terrifying. Speaking of terrifying, this moment with the bird's nest almost getting crushed. How did this work? How was that the only spoke that was missing? Cartoon logic, I guess. It's actually a little difficult to talk about this one without just going through moment by moment and saying, that was great, that was awesome, that's cool. I think what I really like about this one is how it made me feel. It made me feel like I had gone on a journey in this world alongside the animals and had felt the wind, heard the rain, weathered the storm, and come out the other side. It is difficult for any piece of media to do that, and that's what I absolutely adore about all the shorts in Fantasia is how immersive they feel. And like I said, this feels like it could fit right in with any of those shorts. I don't have much else to say, but definitely check this one out if you like Fantasia. You will not be disappointed. Now, this is an interesting one because there was a feature-length remake recently made by Blue Sky Studios starring John Cena. I didn't see it, so I can't compare, but I thought it was an interesting fact. Anyway, Ferdinand follows a bull who is expected to fight in the ring, but just wants to smell flowers. This seems like a classic Disney animal style, very much like Bambi, and like Bambi, I don't really have many strong feelings for it. True, I haven't seen Bambi in over 10 years, so maybe my thoughts have changed, but overall, I watched it, it was cute, and now it's done. But there were a couple of standout aspects. Number one is that the slapstick is a big improvement over Three Orphan Kittens and Country Cousin. The hits feel real in this one, probably because they're not super concerned with preserving anyone's cuteness. They're far more concerned with being funny. And speaking of funny, the narrator for this short is very humorous. I'm not sure if this was just for a few cartoons or a lot, but I remember Disney animation often having some very sassy narrators who interacted with the characters and often made fun of them.
Because she was an understanding mother, even though she was a cow.
This guy's narration definitely elevated an okay story, and it's not a bad story. I can see why the book would be popular. The premise is unique, but it's not a grand, mind-blowing tale. It's just a simple story. And I think this short portrays that simple story reasonably well, with a few good moments of slapstick and one pretty funny, sarcastic narrator. If you like the book, I'm guessing you'll like this, but for me, I won't be watching it anytime soon. I guess Disney was on a kick of adapting children's books. Now, I grew up with the story of the Ugly Duckling, and I think it's a good story, good message for kids, don't judge a book by its cover, although the ending does make it a little confusing, like it's saying don't judge a book by its cover because maybe that cover will become pretty one day. This short actually switches that around a bit. In the original story, the duckling doesn't discover who he is until he grows up into a swan. But in this one, it's just over the course of a few hours until he finds his original family. So I'm not totally sure what the moral is. I guess find your family and you'll be happy? Maybe? Like I said, I'm not sure. But if we ignore the vague moral lessons, this one was another cute one for me. But on the higher end of that scale, the opening is actually quite funny with the duck marital dispute that the ugly duckling causes. I'm assuming they got divorced because we never see that dad again. And it did switch my expectations since I expected the mother duck to welcome the ugly duckling, but she kicks him right to the curb. Mostly this whole short is just this little guy getting his hopes up and being crushed over and over again, although not as crushed as he could have gotten. I really thought this fake duck was going to go a lot more sinister than it did. Because of how well the animators do the sad faces on this guy, it is genuinely heartwarming when he does find his family and is embraced by his mother. So in terms of emotional storytelling, it does its job pretty well. However, it's not an amazing short, but I don't think that's what it was trying to be. It wanted to bring us this simple emotional story with a satisfying resolution, and it did its job. No more, no less. If that sounds appealing, check it out, but it's not going to be on my rewatch list. Three kittens lose their mittens and are sent to bed without supper, so they fly to the Milky Way and discover a land beyond their wildest dreams. The first non-Disney win! This short was produced by Warner Brothers and the Oscar accepted by its co-producer Fred Quincy. Like so many before, this is based on a children's story, or in this case a nursery rhyme which, if I recall correctly, has exactly 2 verses, so not much to go on. When the short started and I recognized the words from the rhyme, I got a little worried that this would be like the tortoise in the hare and be padded to fill the time, but instead, they take the route of doing the rhyme, then saying, and that's what you heard before, now let's show what was also going on.
And now, what happened the rest of that night? Mother Goose books do not say.
This one has a very similar premise to the Three Orphan Kittens. Three kittens arrive in an unfamiliar place, have fun, but make a mess of things and get into trouble. Both are heavily reliant on the cuteness of the kittens, and both have slapstick, which isn't really allowed to go too far in the violence department, which greatly limits the potential humor. But I think the Milky Way succeeds far more than Three Orphan Kittens for one reason: creativity of the environment. In Three Orphan Kittens, they're just in a house, but here, there's no end to the creativity in these environments, and it's not just limited to the final destination. The whole sequence when the kittens fly through space is loaded with fun takes on the celestial bodies, my personal favorite being shooting stars from the planet Mars. I know Mars is the god of war, but I don't think I've ever seen the actual planet turn into a war machine, although I wouldn't put it past Red Rising to do that in the last book. Then when the Milky Way does show up, it's a pretty magical place, and I do love that it's not just one design for the whole place. There's different areas the kittens visit, some of which, it's not just me, right? Someone else must see what these things look like. And I know that is where milk comes from, but they could have made them look less round and more like actual geysers. But whatever, unfortunate design choice, or maybe it was completely intentional. But moving on, overall, this short when compared to Three Orphan Kittens is just way more exciting to watch because the environments are new and different as opposed to just a normal house, which is new to the kittens in the short, but not new to us. I really enjoyed this one. It's the first I actually went back and rewatched because I wanted to catch every single pun made as the kittens flew through the sky, and I definitely recommend checking this one out. The next year gave the first Oscar to a Mickey Mouse short, and what an amazingly okay one to win for. Okay, that sounds worse than it is. It's on the high range of okay. Basically, it's mediocre, but there's a few really good moments which revolve around two characters, and that's the shoulder angel and devil. These guys are hilarious. Of course, the devil has a New York accent, just of course, and I love how easy it is for both of them to manipulate Pluto. It seems kind of like Inside Out. Pluto isn't running the show, they are, and whoever wins gets to be in the driver's seat. It's of course more fun to watch the devil drive, but in the end, you know the angel is going to take control. The slapstick between these two when they fight is the best I've seen so far from Disney, but it is far from the heights I know they'll eventually achieve with the Goofy cartoons in the future. The biggest problem I have with this short is every time these two aren't on screen, we just go back to being cute. And yeah, the kitten is cute, but no cuter than any of the other kittens, just run-of-the-mill cute. Mickey as well, generally nice, although this does appear to be where that Mickey tapping foot meme came from, so little fun fact there. It's just that these two are so funny, and then the rest of it is just eh. And I know the rest of it is most of the story, so yeah, most of the story is just eh, but I would still recommend checking this one out for the angel and devil. Okay, so right off the bat, given the name and the year this won the Oscar, it's probably very obvious the subject of this short. Donald Duck is a factory worker in Germany who the US was not friends with at the time, so we are witness to Donald's suffering living under the German regime, and how much better it would be if he was from the grand old US of A. Yeah, the political commentary here is not subtle in the least. I might even say I don't see how this could be any more obvious. Now, this actually wasn't the first time I watched this short. I saw this in 11th grade as part of the World War II propaganda curriculum, and the version I saw had an intro by Leonard Maltin, who gave the historical context and explained the purpose of the short. Most importantly, explaining why Disney was using its famous characters to create military propaganda. He explains it very well, so I recommend going to watch that. I agree with pretty much everything he says, with one of those points being that this is a very funny cartoon on a base level. And by that, I mean the scenario of Donald working this terrible job in a factory, working 48 hours a day, 30-second vacation, all that stuff is funny, and would still be funny if removed from the political context of the cartoon. However, it is very understandable why it would be difficult to ignore that political context because it's so obvious. Like all propaganda. It's understandable why it was made, it's understandable why it was popular, it's understandable why it won. But it's also very understandable why it would not be at the top of many viewers' rewatch lists. Okay, real quick, editing Maeve here. So apparently Warner Brothers really doesn't like people using Tom and Jerry clips because no matter how short I made the clips in my Tom and Jerry segments, I'm talking no more than 5 seconds per clip, it kept getting blocked. So I've edited all the Tom and Jerry segments in copyright-friendly formats. Basically, when the motion and slapstick of the clip is related to what I'm talking about, I've edited frames together, sort of like storyboards, so you can still get a sense of what's going on, and for all the other clips, I've turned them into Ken Burns stills. So sorry about that, but the copyright overlord must be appeased. And back to the show. Given the title of this one and the content of the previous, I really thought this would be about something else, but apparently it's just referring to the backing music, so with that bullet dodged, we've got the first Oscar for Tom and Jerry, and yeah, pretty funny one to get it. I am by no means a Tom and Jerry expert. I grew up with Looney Tunes, so I'm not sure if this is one of their best, but I'm guessing it's at least in the middle. I thought the slapstick was solid, and like other Tom and Jerry cartoons, everything is very well set up without the need for any dialogue. By far my favorite slapstick moment was Jerry slapping Tom with a wooden plank, but I did have a little issue with the energy level, as it was a little weird. It starts right up at an 11 for the first few scenes, and it feels actually like the climax, and a very funny climax. Then for the next few scenes, it does slow down for a bit, and then picks back up again, but never to the heights of those first few scenes. It did feel a little weird, like why didn't they start at an 8 and ramp up to an 11 for the climax? It kind of made the short feel a little clumsy at times, but for those first few scenes, they were really great. The middle just dragged a little, and the ending didn't quite live up to the beginning. That's not to say the ending wasn't good, just not as good as the opening. As an intro to Tom and Jerry, I had a decent time. I definitely got a few laughs out of this one, but from what I've heard about Tom and Jerry, there's better out there, and I'm excited to see what's to come. Wow, I knew there was better to come, but I didn't know it would come so soon. I laughed hard several times throughout this short. Every single setup and literal punchline hit a dead-on bullseye. Just the premise of Tom getting a How to Catch a Mouse book and going through every piece of advice to try to catch Jerry is a brilliant setup. And right off the bat, the non-slapstick jokes are amazing, with Tom reading the How to Catch a Mouse book as Jerry lays right under his nose reading along. It seems like every joke sets up a joke which has a clear punchline, and that punchline is then flipped on its head with some twist. We expect a regular snare and get a treat. We expect Tom to be sawed in half like he's been before, but we aren't even allowed to see it because of how apparently gruesome it was. I don't know what we expected for this one, but it certainly wasn't Tom speaking for the first time.
Don't you believe it?
This was probably my favorite joke because it makes literally no sense. Why that voice? Why the weird echo? Just why? I don't know, it's just hilarious. Something else I loved about this special, which sets it apart from other slapstick cartoons, was the continuity. Usually in a cat and mouse segment like Sylvester and Tweety, Coyote and Roadrunner, or Ralph and Sam, the injuries don't roll over into the next scene. They're just miraculously a-okay. In this one, that's mostly true, but a few things do cross over. He has to wear a toupee after getting the top of his head shot off, and the hiccuping after eating the robot continues until the very end. And speaking of the end, such a classic joke with everything blowing up except for the one spot the hero is standing. I've seen it a million times, but it never gets old. A great end to an amazing cartoon. Definitely check this one out and get a whole lot of laughs. Tom and Jerry are on a roll with the Oscars, or should I say, Fred Quimby is on a roll with the Oscars. I guess he was the Disney of Tom and Jerry cartoons. In this short, Tom is chasing after Jerry, but the household dog wants some shut-eye, so Jerry tries his best to get Tom in trouble for waking him up. Anyway, while I wouldn't say this one is bad, after the perfection of Mouse Trouble, it is taking a few steps back in quality. While it is paced better than Yankee Doodle Mouse with a clear escalation from beginning to middle to end, none of the slapstick bits reach very grand heights, and a few things do occur which I'm not a big fan of. Number one, I don't think there should have been any dialogue. Something I really admire about cartoons like Tom and Jerry and Roadrunner is their ability to get across the premise and story without any dialogue. And while the dog did have to convey some more complicated emotions and topics, I think it could have been done through just facial expressions and body language. But with him, I understand more why they had him talking. With Tom, I am a little bit more mystified why they decided to have him talk. The singing I sort of get, it's kind of like when he talked in Mouse Trouble, it's out of nowhere, so it's kind of funny, but who thought that this joke would work?
Let me have it!
Honestly, he could have just given Jerry the pie and stood there smiling as the pie was thrown in his face. Or they could have used a sign instead, but the let me have it joke isn't great to begin with, and I just don't think it worked here. There were some good moments, and I would put this on the same level, or maybe just a little below Yankee Doodle Mouse, but after Mouse Trouble, it's a bit of a downgrade. If you're a Tom and Jerry fan, this will probably hit the spot, but for the casual viewer, there's better out there. 4 in a row, way to go Quimby, and wow was this well deserved. This short sees Tom trying to perform a solo piano concert, but it just so happens that Jerry is living in the piano and doesn't appreciate his sleep being disturbed. While I think Mouse Trouble is still a personal favorite of the Tom and Jerry Oscar winners, Cat Concerto does come in at a close second. I think maybe because Mouse Trouble is what I think of when I think of a Tom and Jerry cartoon, and while Cat Concerto is funny, amazingly funny in fact, it does step a little outside of the established lore. Or at least the lore I understand, which I don't think I understand very well. Have I mentioned I'm uncultured? But from my limited understanding of Tom and Jerry, this does seem to switch a few things up. For starters, Tom is on his own for the first 2 minutes, which in a 7-minute short is also a third of the running time. Something I've never seen before. And despite him being on his own, he's still really funny. Then when Jerry does show up, it's a bit of a role reversal. Well, maybe not a role reversal, but a sharing of the roles. Usually Tom chases Jerry for eating or something similar to that, and Jerry runs and sets traps for Tom. Here, both are kind of going after each other and getting hurt an equal amount. Of course, Jerry does eventually get the last laugh, and I will say Tom's injuries do appear to be a little worse than Jerry's, but this is one of the only times I've seen Jerry take any hits. It's also unique that I'm actually conflicted about whose side to be on. I'm kind of wishing the whole time that Jerry would just let Tom finish his concert. And I know Tom isn't exactly being nice to Jerry, but it's not his fault Jerry set up camp inside the piano, which, by the way, how long has he been living there without incident? I mean, he's got a fancy mouse hole and everything, so has no one played this piano for months? Am I overthinking this? Yeah, probably. Anyway, I got quite a few laughs out of this one, and I recommend it for anyone who's looking for a good musical cat fight. Well, Tom and Jerry got 4, why not give some to the Looney Tunes? Now, this is where my expertise lies. We had quite a few Looney Tunes collections growing up, and one DVD was exclusively Tweety and Sylvester shorts, this one included, so this is definitely not my first viewing by a long shot. I will say I was a little surprised that this won an Oscar, because it was a very early Sylvester and Tweety cartoon. I mean, Sylvester isn't even called Sylvester, his name is Thomas, which just sounds wrong. It's also not what I think of when I think of a really good Sylvester and Tweety cartoon, but maybe that's a testament to their shorts. Even an early one which falls short of the others is Academy Award worthy. And there are some great bits. I love the escalation of Sylvester's schemes to get Tweety. Yes, I know his name is Thomas in this, but it's Sylvester. I'm calling him Sylvester. Every time he's foiled, his next plan solves the problem Tweety exploited with the last one, but has a new glaring problem which results in him literally crashing and burning. Definitely my favorite joke was the elaborate birdseed trap, not just because it's highly ineffective given how slow it is and how easy it would be for Tweety to step out of the way, but because it fails for literally no reason. We never see how the bowling ball got off the track, it's just Sylvester's fate that his traps go wrong. It's inevitable. And one more thing, this was present in the Tom and Jerry cartoons, but I think Looney Tunes does it even better. The music is so good. Every single movement by the characters is scored to perfection. If I recall correctly, Looney Tunes had an entire orchestra providing the backing track, so not only does it complement every character motion, it sounds so grand and over the top for such a silly cartoon. I'm not sure if there's a documentary out there about the scoring of these shorts, but I'd watch it in a heartbeat. This short, on the other hand, it's not very high on my Sylvester Tweety cartoon rewatch list, but I've definitely put it on at least a few times every year when I do a Looney Tunes binge night. So it's not the best of its kind, but it's really good, so I'd still say check it out. Guess these guys didn't like not having the trophy because Tom and Jerry are back on top this year with a very funny short that needs a little bit of overlooking to be enjoyed. Jerry has an orphan named Nibbles placed in his care who is always hungry. Luckily, it's Thanksgiving and there's plenty to eat, but as always, Tom isn't going to let them go anywhere without a fight. Okay, we've got a little bit more stereotyping in this one, with Tom putting on a feather duster as a makeshift Native American headdress and doing some stereotypical war cries throughout the short. It's uncomfortable, which is very unfortunate because the surrounding cartoon is very funny. This is the kind of food-related slapstick I wanted to see in Three Orphan Kittens and Country Cousin. Eating food which shapes the body the same way, eating their way up the spaghetti, taking bites of food that isn't food, these are the jokes I was looking for. It's also a pretty good switch-up with the addition of another mouse who tag teams in on fighting Tom, making the jokes feel a little more fresh. I'm also really happy that he wasn't just stuck in the cute category. I mean, he's definitely cute, but he's also allowed to partake in just as much slapstick as Jerry, and the focus of the short isn't how cute he is, it's more Jerry has a friend, what are the possibilities? Definitely my favorite joke was this bit with the champagne. It's that same joke from Quiet Please where Tom talks, just done right. There, the joke was ruined by Tom saying, "Let me have it." Here, his movement and expression clearly conveys to the audience, "Let me have it," without the need for words. And it just makes the joke 10 times funnier. The music as well, I noticed improved quite a bit with this one. For Tweety Pie, I know I said I thought Looney Tunes did the music better, but every little detail in this one has a matching musical accompaniment. So yeah, most of the jokes hit bullseyes, and this new character is a welcome addition. However, the uncomfortable moments are holding this one back for me. I know it's of the time, but for me, it's just a little hard to get over those poorly aged moments and enjoy the rest of the cartoon. If that's not something that bothers you, I'd say this is a great short to check out, but if you struggle with looking past the signs of the time, I'd say there's better shorts out there. Looney Tunes takes the trophy back in 1949 with, for sentimental reasons, spelled in the pun way because it's a skunk. And a very controversial skunk. I know it was a big story a few years ago when Pepe Le Pew was not included in Space Jam 2, and there was a big to-do about the cancellation of the character. Personally, I don't think his inclusion would have helped that movie, but I guess some people just need to fuel their rant machine, and this was a popular topic. That being said, I don't think a more updated Pepe Le Pew is impossible to conceive of, since we pretty much got that in the new Looney Tunes show, which portrayed him as a big-time player who couldn't stop getting married, but later in the show showed him in group therapy getting help for his fear of commitment. I thought that was brilliant. But that's the modern view of the character. What about his origins? Well, we have the story of a skunk mistaking a cat for a female skunk and throwing himself over and over at her while mistaking her rejections for Plan Hard to Get, and it hasn't quite aged well. However, I don't think the overall short is that bad. The revolution I actually find quite funny. It's just a lot of these jokes which are played for laughs. I mean, obviously they're played for laughs, they're jokes. They just don't feel great. And on top of that, I don't think they're that funny. Even if we removed any context of them being uncomfortable, none of these setups and punchlines are that amazing. I guess what I'm saying is, it's not funny enough to justify the problematic nature of the jokes. Now remember, I did say I liked the resolution, and by that I mean I like that Pepe gets some comeuppance. I don't think it's enough, but I like that he doesn't get rewarded in the end for all the crap he put the cat through. This is one which I think kids who don't yet have the real-world context of the cartoon's themes will still find funny, but not super funny. That was my reaction as a kid. I watched it if it was the next on the queue, but it's not one I would seek out to watch. But for adults who do have the real-world context, I don't know. For me, I can definitely watch it and only cringe a little, and actually laugh a little at the end, but I'm not gonna pretend I don't see why someone would get really uncomfortable watching this. Then again, I don't think that a character should be erased. Like I said, the new Looney Tunes show did a great job with him. So if you're on a mission to see every Looney Tunes short and you don't see a problem with these kinds of jokes, check it out, but just don't expect much. Well, with a new decade, a new contender has entered the animation short game, with Columbia Pictures receiving its first Oscar for Gerald McBoing Boing, the story of a boy who doesn't talk but instead makes sound effects. It's a very cute story, and overall a very cute short, but not in a bad way, in a heartwarming way. And I think this does come down to the animation style. This isn't a realistic style like Disney or a slapstick style like Warner Brothers. It's actually the first kind of abstract short to win the Oscar. And the art style makes a little more sense when you realize that this story was co-written by Dr. Seuss, who later published it as a golden book. Now, the style isn't exactly what you think of when you think of Seuss, but the simplicity and flexibility and the reality of colors definitely makes it stand apart from the shorts that have won previously. Actually, that's probably my favorite aspect of the cartoon, is the animation style. If you were to look at a still from this and a still from a Disney short, most likely you would say the Disney short looks better, but sometimes it's not about what's prettier or what's more realistic, it's about using what little you've got to create the best possible product. This was clearly working on a much lower budget than any of the Disney or Warner Brothers shorts. It even clearly cuts corners on slapstick by having the camera off the characters when they jump. But the movements are still fluid, the character designs are interesting, and Gerald is ridiculously cute. He actually reminds me a lot of Harold from Harold and the Purple Crayon. Yeah, in your dreams. There you go. It's such a simple design, but somehow the innocence of childhood is gotten across in just a few pencil lines and zero dialogue. Yeah, even though he makes noises, Gerald never speaks, so his emotions are conveyed just through the drawings, and it's really well done. So I'm doing a lot of praising here, but does that mean that it's the best so far? Oh, definitely not. It's good and does well with a lower budget and a simple story, but it's not incredibly funny or emotionally powerful. It's cute with a good heart at the center. I wouldn't say seek it out if you're an adult, but it's a great one to put on for kids and then enjoy the fun along with them. Tom and Jerry take that trophy right back with the Two Musketeers. Now, terrible confession, but I have never read or watched any version of the Three Musketeers, so I have no idea if this is in any way following the original source or if they just wanted a cute name. But either way, this was a fun one with an extremely surprising ending. This is very similar to The Little Orphan, with the setting being a fancy dinner table and the goal for Jerry and Nibbles being to eat everything. But it doesn't feel like a repeat because of the change in setting and the addition of these costumes. Setting it in, I'm not very good at time periods, late 19th century France, and the fact that Nibbles now talks sets it apart from The Little Orphan, even while it recycles many of the same jokes. I just love the take the shape of the food you eat bit. Also, this short is absent of any uncomfortableness that The Little Orphan had, so if you like the jokes in that one but wish it was more timeless, this is definitely the one to watch. In addition to the lack of dated materials, Nibbles in this I think is a lot better. Not that he was bad in The Little Orphan, but the addition of him talking elevates his character quite a bit. When he did first speak, I honestly thought I wouldn't like it, similar to how I didn't like when the dog talked in Quiet Please, but my goodness, did it make this little guy even cuter. Apparently he was voiced by an actual French child, and it's adorable. So, adorable kid, classic Tom and Jerry slapstick, and a timeless feel, and Tom gets beheaded. Yeah, not exactly the ending I was expecting. I know they set up the guillotine in the beginning, but I still didn't think they would actually use it. But even with this being a pretty dark ending, it's still really funny. Just how grim the music gets and how final that head shop sound is, and then it just goes right back to happy music without any transition. I don't know, maybe I'm just sick, but I laughed hard. So like I said, this feels very reminiscent of The Little Orphan, just with better laughs, a much more timeless feel, an adorable talking Nibbles, and a really funny dark ending. Definitely highly recommend this one, and it was a well-deserved win. Tom and Jerry would win again the next year, with unfortunately a bit of a downgrade, mostly because Johann Mouse is an unusually non-violent Tom and Jerry short. In this one, Tom and Jerry live in the house of Johann Strauss, who plays the piano every day, making Jerry always want to dance. Whenever he dances, Tom has the opportunity to grab him, but never succeeds. After Strauss stops playing, Tom learns to play himself and uses his new skill to try to catch Jerry. Tom does run into a few walls at the beginning and one at the end, but for pretty much the entire middle, there's no slapstick and just with piano playing and dancing, which is cute, but not amazingly entertaining. Although this joke on Tom learning to play the piano, quite good. As someone who is in the middle of learning how to play the piano, yeah, that's definitely how it works. Learn 6 notes, then you're golden. I honestly don't have much to say about this one because not a whole lot happens. There's only one slapstick running joke and the rest is just music. Even the animation is a little weird, as a good portion of the story is told through the storybook pages. I'm not sure if this was a stylistic choice or if it was done to save money, but it does feel a little odd for a Tom and Jerry cartoon. What I will say is that the narrator is a delightful addition. Hans Conried lends his voice to this short, and he is perfectly witty and adorable at the same time, with I think maybe a German accent? Not totally sure.
A mouse that could was? Good heavens! The Emperor couldn't believe his ears.
The whole time I was watching it, I was trying to figure out where I had heard that voice before, and turns out it's Captain Hook from Disney's Peter Pan. I'm really impressed with his range. I mean, in Peter Pan, he has a great range playing both the father and Captain Hook, but this is a completely different vibe from either of those characters, and he absolutely nails it. I mean, I know he's an actor and that's his job, but I can still praise him if he does his job well, and yeah, he did it really well. So overall, not my favorite Tom and Jerry short. Mouse Trouble and the Two Musketeers are definitely still on top. I think I just prefer the classic fights, and I was a little jarred by their absence. But it was still enjoyable and the music was very pleasant, so Tom and Jerry fans, I would say check this out, but expect something a little different. So this is definitely a more educational Disney short. It's interesting to see this because I actually grew up with another Disney educational short, Donald in Mathmagicland, and I absolutely loved it. I didn't really notice it was educating me because Donald and the narrator just made it so much fun. It didn't teach math in a condescending or boring way, it was just a fun time. And I think Toot Whistle Plunk Boom uses a very similar technique to get across a simplified version of musical instrument history, which is fun and very informative. Right off the bat, the animation style does make it clear this is not like the previous Disney shorts. It's not animated in a realistic style. It's definitely going for humor and simple designs. So when the education does start, I wasn't too surprised, and what little surprise I did have was quite pleasant. I love the framing device they use for teaching the history of each instrument, with the very basic horn, flute, string, and drum being laid out in caveman terms, and then each being delved into in greater detail. And I'll admit it, I did learn a few things. Quite shamefully, the one I learned the most about was the horn, and I say it's shameful because I played trumpet for 7 years and never once did I bother to learn how the mechanics of the instrument worked or what the history of it was. So 8 years late, I finally have the answer. Every segment also keeps a bit of humor going along with the education to keep the kids engaged. My particular favorite was the string section, which showed the evolution and different ways a string instrument was used, but kept the running joke of every time a few notes are played, the string always breaks. Now, even though this short combines humor and learning quite effectively, I'd still say Donald in Mathmagicland is better. Of course, it's entirely possible that's the nostalgia talking, but I think the fact that it's Donald Duck and not these random nameless characters gives it an edge, as well as the narrator having a very distinct personality.
Come on, let's go to ancient Greece, to the time of Pythagoras, the master egghead of them all.
Unlike this guy who's just kind of nice, there is also, again, a few moments that severely date this short. It was doing so well and then it just had to go and do that. I'll say it is very quick, but it's still there, so just know that going in. Overall, I enjoyed this one. It's bright, colorful, imaginative, with an offbeat animation style, and surprisingly informative. If you need an instrument history lesson for dummies, I'd say this is the short for you. Columbia Pictures brings home their second win. Now, I've heard of Mr. Magoo, but I've never seen a short, so this was my first, and it was alright. I would say mildly amusing. In this short, the nearsighted Mr. Magoo is on his way to the movies, but instead goes to the airport, boards the plane, and partakes in a thrilling wing walk, all while having no idea what's going on. It is pretty much the same joke over and over again, but how they escalate the misunderstanding Mr. Magoo has with his surroundings, I think does get kind of funny. The more absurd it gets, definitely the better the humor. Him walking around on the outside of the plane did get a few audible laughs. But aside from the repetitive jokes, what does raise this short up a bit for me are two things. Number one is the side plot. These three additional characters, the briefcase man, the cop, and the flight attendant, are all very funny despite not really needing to be. I do like the overall joke that they are in an old school noir while Mr. Magoo is just happily stumbling along. Honestly, their story would probably be more interesting than this whole short, but maybe that's part of the overall joke as well. That we're stuck with this unassuming old man and missing out on the real story. And the second reason this short gets additional points is how sweet Mr. Magoo is. He's just all around a pleasant guy who unfortunately misunderstands everything because I guess he refuses to get glasses. Honestly, that hits close to home because for the longest time my grandmother refused to get hearing aids even though we were literally shouting at her that she needed them. So I think maybe that's why this guy was so popular. He was oblivious to a lot of things, but he was just really sweet about everything. Of course, I am basing that theory off of exactly one short, so we'll see if that theory rings true after watching some more. I'm not going to seek out these shorts, but it was a pleasant surprise that it was mildly amusing. If that sounds appealing, I guess check it out. With just a 5-year gap, Looney Tunes wins their 3rd Oscar! Like Tweety Pie, I watched this a lot growing up, but unlike Tweety Pie, this was one of my favorites. In this short, the mice living on the Mexico border are hungry for cheese from the factory, but it is guarded by Sylvester, so they call in the help of Speedy Gonzales, who is just too much for Sylvester to handle. I think I actually prefer the Speedy Sylvester team-up to the Tweety Sylvester team-up because it's just comical how out of his league Sylvester is with Speedy. It's almost identical to the Roadrunner Coyote cartoons, just with talking. There is never a worry in our minds that Speedy will be caught. No matter how hard Sylvester tries, he's just not good enough. And I definitely prefer Speedy to Tweety because he's just funnier. Tweety does fall into the trying to be cute category, not to the extent that Disney goes. He's still allowed to make some funny faces, but he's usually not physically funny, whereas Speedy just is. His speed is so exaggerated and the commotion his speed causes around him, I just find really fun. I think as a kid also, I really liked hearing his accent, mostly because I'd never heard that accent before. Now, of course, I hear it all the time, but back then it was fun to hear. In terms of my favorite bit, definitely the running through Sylvester joke. They do this a lot with Sylvester to the point where I actually got confused on how the human body worked. Like, is there actually a tube that goes straight through us? Luckily, I had Magic School Bus to teach me the truth. I would recommend this to any Looney Tunes fans, and even if you're not, this might be a good one to start your Looney journey. Well, Mr. Magoo grabs his 2nd Oscar, and it does seem like the Magoo shorts have a formula, and that formula is one joke over and over again. In this one, Mr. Magoo purchases a new car, drives it into the ocean, and that's about it. Last time it was a plane, this time it's an underwater car, but either way, Magoo is oblivious. And this time, we don't even have the side characters having their own adventure to break up the monotony, and Mr. Magoo is quite a bit of a jerk in this one, so we don't even get his pleasantness to help us along. Instead, we have his apparently idiotic nephew who never realizes they are underwater, despite him being able to see actual fish swimming by. That's getting a little too dumb, even for cartoon logic. Honestly, this one was just kind of noise for me, very easy to put on in the background while you do something else. You're not gonna miss any big laughs because there aren't any, and the story isn't exactly complicated to follow. So honestly, this one's an easy one to skip. This is like a ping pong game from Magoo to Looney Tunes, and I think you know which one I prefer. In Birds Anonymous, Sylvester joins a help group to try to kick his obsession with Tweety. I guess let's point out the obvious. This one gets intense. Yeah, it's still exaggerated and funny, but a lot of it feels very real. Like whoever wrote this researched addiction or had a problem themselves and put that experience into the jokes. Honestly, it gets a little uncomfortable at times, but then I remind myself his fix is a bird. That's funny. Probably my favorite bit was all the triggers Sylvester keeps getting exposed to. I know he's suffering, but this is just so funny. But I think maybe the best part is that in the end, Sylvester does improve. He does the work to kick his habit and even helps his sponsor from relapsing. Isn't it weird I'm saying sponsor and relapse while talking about a Looney Tune? Even though there's some intentionally uncomfortable moments, they kind of make everything even funnier, so highly recommend. The first Oscar for Bugs Bunny! Honestly, I prefer him as a mascot over Mickey Mouse. He's just funnier, and I'm glad his first Oscar is for a pretty funny cartoon. In this short, Bugs is sent by the king to retrieve this singing sword from the Black Knight and his fire-breathing dragon, and wouldn't you know it, a familiar face happens to be behind the Black Knight armor. This is definitely not the best Bugs cartoon I've ever seen, but his best is unbelievably awesome, so even an average Bugs Bunny short is a delight. Especially with Sam, who may be my favorite Bugs Bunny antagonist. His voice, design, mannerisms, they all combine to create the perfect comedic doofus. And is it just me, or is this dragon kind of adorable? The jokes around his sneezing are actually some of my favorites in this short, but my absolute favorite does have to go to the drawbridge scene. Sam running around as a pancake never fails to make me laugh.
You forced me to use force!
And And we get a classic TNT ending. Can't really go wrong with a huge room full of explosives and a sneezy dragon. This one is a pretty standard, or maybe even a little above average Golden Era Looney Tune. I can see why it won, and I'd say check it out for a few easy laughs. An independent short takes the trophy in 1960, the first one to do so, and I am really surprised this was nominated, let alone won. Oh, not because it's bad, but because it's so different. This was produced and directed by a husband and wife team while their sons voiced the two young boys who are on a search for the moonbird. I don't know how they did it, but this is some of the most realistic kid dialogue I've ever heard. Right down to I can barely understand the younger one.
Yeah! No, I didn't sing this song!
It almost feels like the directors followed their kids on a midnight adventure and recorded what actually happened. And after pausing to do a little bit of research, turns out that is what happened. But they didn't go out into the middle of the woods because it was just the boys having an imaginary adventure around the house and they didn't know they were being recorded. I remember having those kind of adventures. True, often it was by myself with all internal dialogue, but watching this and finding out that fact brought me right back to all those long summer afternoons wandering around the backyard. I know Disney spends a lot of time and effort and money to look realistic with its shorts, but this one surpassed that realism with just some very rough sketches. Like with Fantasia segments, I feel like I went on a journey with these boys. They really feel so real, almost to the extent of being annoying, because kids are annoying, but there's that fine line of reality separating me from actually getting riled up. I think the closest thing I can compare this to is My Neighbor Totoro. It's a similar story of siblings finding a possibly mystical creature in the woods, and that's about it. It actually has even less plot and focus than My Neighbor Totoro, and I really don't mind. It was a very unique artistic experience, and I'm very surprised it won. Again, not because it's bad, but because it's so different. A Looney Tune and Silly Symphony short were up for the award that year. I haven't seen either, but I'm really pleasantly surprised that this one got the trophy. For the average movie viewer, I'm not sure if you'll like this one because it is pretty offbeat. It's not really funny, visually dazzling, or even entertaining. It's just something I can't quite describe, so I won't say it's for everyone, but I definitely think some people will latch onto this and find a lot to connect with. Well, that was heavy. Monroe follows a 4-year-old boy who was drafted into the army and can't convince anyone that he's 4, so he becomes a model soldier until he just can't take it anymore. 1961, obviously a big time for political activism, and I think this might be one of the best I've seen in getting its message across, because the presentation is so innocent and actually framed kind of comedically. Remember De Fure Face and how it was impossible to miss the message? Well, this is kind of the opposite. I could see a young kid not understanding that this is political at all. And that does seem to be the point with animating it in this incredibly simple style, which doesn't have any obvious symbolism. Actually, the animation style kind of reminds me of Peanuts. And in addition to that animation look being sort of a hiding place for the political messaging, the narrator hides any political activism behind a comedic wall. He's even voiced by a well-known comedian, framing almost everything as a joke and having the political messaging be quite subtle. So I'm on the verge of laughing, but then I just feel awful and kind of depressed when the little political jabs are snuck in.
For if so many wise men claimed it was impossible for him to be 4, how could he be 4?
And when Monroe finally breaks down, judging by the cast list, it seems like this is another example of the director using his kids in the main role, and the way this kid cries is haunting. I actually kind of wanted to turn it off because I get all the subtext going on here, and it was a lot. Like to the point where I teared up a bit. And then that ending left me with this big empty pit in my stomach. I mean, I didn't grow up during that time, but I've read books and seen movies, and oh my goodness, it was rough. I'm curious what people of the time thought about this, or if it did its job in getting its message across. Personally, I think it did an amazing job, which is why I don't really want to watch it again. But I have to appreciate the talent of this director in getting this pretty horrid scenario across in a G-rated cartoon. So I'm not thinking this would be a pleasant watch for the casual cartoon viewer, but if you're a history buff or learning about the war, I'd have to say this is a must-watch. So I guess the Academy was taking a break from mainstream animation for a few years. Eratz, no clue if I'm pronouncing that right, took the trophy in 1962. This short follows a strange man on a beach trip who just so happens to have everything a person might need in inflatable form, including sentient life. So the basic look on my face the whole time this was playing was confusion with a hint of mild amusement and a lot more confusion. The whole thing kind of feels like a horny version of Harold and the Purple Crayon, but instead of drawing everything, he's inflating everything. And then in the end, Harold turns out to be a drawing himself. I'm not sure what to say about this one. It is definitely unique. The art style I can't say is one I've seen before in cartoons. It actually kind of feels like a Picasso painting come to life, which I didn't think was possible. I will definitely say that there were jokes I laughed at. The enhancing of the assets, classic. The flexible body shape of our main guy, and that existential crisis ending. What even was he? Was he alive? Are we alive? What makes us human? I don't know if that was intentional, but I think questions like that are valid after an ending like that. I think overall I did like it, and it's one I would recommend to animation lovers and film buffs. Personally, I'm not going to rewatch it soon, but if I met a lover of weird animation, this would be a top contender for recommendations. The Hubleys husband and wife team are back after just 2 years for their second win. After recording their children, they have upgraded to actual adults. So unlike Moonbird, this was not a secret recording or a spontaneous adventure. However, it was not scripted. Two actors, Dizzy Gillespie and George Matthews, improv the whole conversation based on the scenario of two construction workers talking about possible nuclear attacks. I did realize while watching this that both this and Moonbird might be kind of the first animatics. Those animated shorts on YouTube which take a popular audio from something like Game Changer and animate it in a correct environment. And that is what this kind of feels like. It feels like someone clipped 15 minutes out of some podcast and animated it to give it more visual context to what they're talking about and add additional humor. Like in this scene when one of the workers is being a little annoying, he's animated to be following close behind and stopped the other from doing his work. Little bits of additional humor are scattered throughout, and overall, I'm not sure what I thought about this one. I definitely liked the Moonbird better because I connected with it more. It made me reminiscent of similar adventures I went on as a kid. This one, I'm not really sure what to think. Honestly, it just kind of feels like what I said before, an animatic of some podcast. I guess in that sense, it's impressive how real this improvised conversation feels, and who knows, maybe they actually got into it and all the points they were making were true to them. I don't know, I wasn't there. But the thing is, I'm not a huge fan of podcasts. I just don't really like listening to people talk about stuff for extended periods of time. Moonbird worked a lot more because it was kids talking about nonsense for 10 minutes, whereas this is two adults talking about real stuff for over 15. At a certain point, I started to check the timestamp wondering when it would be over. But then again, this is clearly very experimental, and part of experimental filmmaking is taking risks that, for many viewers, won't pay off. I'm sure a lot of film historians love this short, and for any film students out there, I would suggest at least watching it to see this type of experiment in action. But for me, I'll stick with the imaginary adventure. The man himself, Mel Brooks, took home the Oscar in 1964 with somehow the funniest short so far, despite it being ridiculously simple. I almost feel bad for saying that this is the funniest I've seen so far because clearly hundreds of hours were put into the Tom and Jerry and Looney Tunes shorts, painstakingly planning out every hit and indent. And yet somehow some abstract shapes with a sarcastic narration pointing out how crappy it was just hit my funny bone dead on. Seriously, that's all this short is. A bunch of random shapes sometimes moving around and a grumpy old man complains about how awful and occasionally dirty it is.
This is cute. This is cute. This is nice. What the hell is it? Oh, I know what it is. It's garbage, that's what it is.
Also, it's by far the shortest short to win at just over 3 minutes, including credits. There's not much to say about this, partly because, like I said, it's barely 3 minutes of content, but also, I don't want to spoil the jokes. Every single one caught me off guard, and one actually made me choke because I was in the middle of eating pretzels and inhaled the crumbs from laughing so hard. Watch this short immediately. I guarantee it'll make you laugh. Here comes a new character into the mix. The Pink Panther claims victory in 1965 with the Pink Fink. The Pink Panther was never a favorite character of mine. I always viewed these shorts as Looney Tunes light. The slapstick wasn't as funny, the scenarios weren't as crazy, and on the whole, the character just felt very safe. And that same Looney Tunes light energy is felt here with the Panther and the Little Man, seriously, that's his official name, competing to paint various walls the color they prefer. And that's pretty much the only joke, just different types of things the Little Man is trying to paint and escalating ways in which the Panther foils his plans. I did find it clever that in the end the Little Man does end up finishing the pink job on the house himself while trying to take the Panther out, and his ultimate foil at the end, how everything growing pink was caused by his own attempt to get rid of the pink forever. I would probably compare this to the first Mr. Magoo short. Overall, it's mildly amusing, nothing that got any audible laughs, but did get a couple of smiles, and it is generally pleasant. Definitely more of a background or babysitting cartoon, but sometimes that's what you need. If you want an introduction to the original Pink Panther, I guess this is a good enough one to watch. I think my mom would like this one. She's a math teacher. The Dot and the Line, A Romance in Lower Mathematics, took victory in 1966, and let me tell you, as soon as I saw who wrote this one, I knew I would like it. For anyone who doesn't know, Norton Juster is the author of pretty much my favorite book of all time, The Phantom Tollbooth. I can't even begin to explain its brilliance, just go read it. But after watching it, this thing has Norton's fingerprints all over it, in the best way. I can actually see this story as a side quest in the Phantom Tollbooth, which, who knows, maybe it was in one of the first drafts. The story follows a straight line who is in love with a ball, but the ball is in love with his scribble and won't give him the time of day, so he practices on making himself the vector she wants him to be. Given the fact that the characters are actually just shapes, the animation seems like it would be very simple, and it is, but it also gets incredibly complex when it gets into the various shapes the line turns itself into, and there's a whole lot of creativity in these designs. I mean, maybe not creativity, since it's all just math shapes, but the way they are drawn morphing into each other is well thought out, and I love the progression of simple shapes to whatever the heck these things are. I'm a little less enthused about the ending. I get the message of not going full anarchy but still embracing uniqueness, but that's the thing. I got it too much. I thought it should have been a little more subtle in its messaging. However, that's not really what Norton does. For anyone who has read Phantom Tollbooth, it's anything but subtle. I mean, the whole mission of the book is to bring back two princesses to save the kingdom, and their names are literally rhyme and reason. Maybe it was all the extra creativity in the book that distracted me a bit better from the obvious messaging than this one did. So while I like this one, and I think it's a great short for kids, I didn't get as much out of it as I thought I would after I saw the creative talent behind it. But maybe I just set my hopes too high. Also, there were probably quite a few real math references made that I missed, so I'm excited to show this to my mom and get her opinion. So do I recommend this short? Yes, but more as a door-opening experience to Norton Juster and his other work. Seriously, read The Phantom Tollbooth. It's a masterpiece. Dang, the Hubleys again! They really had their finger on the pulse of what the Academy wanted, cause while I like their stuff, it's so offbeat with such a rough animation style, I'm surprised the Academy, literally the most prestigious and, let's face it, stuffy film society, would consider these to be the best of the year. However, it does seem like there were slim pickings this year for animation shorts, as well as the following few years, cause instead of the usual 5 nominees, there are only 3. So what's this short titled A Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass Double Feature about? Well, actually, there are 2 cartoons in this 5-minute short. Both are set to a well-known song. In the first one, called Spanish Flea, a flea goes around to a bunch of animals and just kind of annoys them until a resort is built and all the animals are driven away. So he starts biting the humans until they leave and the animals come back. And in the second short, Tijuana Taxi, a group of people in a taxi drive around the city causing havoc and then flies off a cliff. Like, literally, the taxi cab flies. It's really just a bunch of stuff that happens and then it's over. There's some mildly amusing stuff, like this old man getting run over but being completely fine, and these animals' reactions to getting bitten, but overall, I wouldn't say I really liked this one. The roughness of the animation style I don't think can stand on its own without the wholesome story of Moonbird or the realness of the whole. So I don't think I recommend this one unless you're really into experimental animation. For me, I still think Moonbird was the best, but I'm still glad 2 independent animators won 3 Oscars in just 8 years. That is impressive. So check it out if you're interested, but I don't think you're missing much. More independent animation for the win! The box follows a short man who enters a bar with a mysterious box, the contents of which scares one patron, disgusts another, and eventually leads to love. Another rough animation with clearly just pencil sketches of the final product, and at first I was a little worried because, like the previous short, there was no dialogue, and I didn't think the animation would be strong enough to hold my interest for the whole time. Well, luckily this cartoon has an ongoing mystery that kept me invested. That being, what the heck is in the box? From the first man's reaction, I was thinking maybe it was a portal to hell, and from the second lady's very different reaction, I thought maybe it changes based on who's looking at it. But in the end, it turns out it's just some animal. I'm thinking maybe a frog? Possibly. Or who knows, maybe it was an entity that shape-shifted based on its feelings towards whoever was looking at it. No clue, but I do like that this short leaves that interpretation up to the audience. Also something I like, these two are absolutely adorable together. At first I was thinking, oh, this is creepy, I mean, what's the age gap here? But I did slowly forget about that since it's made clear she is just as bizarre as him. And maybe even they're both part of some secret alien box keepers and they're just glad to have found each other. Again, I don't know, but it's cool that this short is letting me come up with these weird conclusions. So that's the story. What about the animation? Well, like I said, it's pretty rough pencil sketches, almost like storyboards of an animated film, but there's clearly talent behind it. Like the multiple shots of the camera panning, I don't know about hand-drawn animation that much, but that felt impressive because it basically went 3D. I don't know, maybe it's the easiest thing in the world, but somehow I'm thinking that took a lot of work. So overall, this does not seem to be Oscar material at first glance, but there is a cleverness in the idea and execution. It's by no means mind-blowing, and I wouldn't seek this out. There's not really much in it that we haven't seen elsewhere, but I enjoyed it. And if you have any interest, I'd say it's worth your time. Winnie the Pooh gets his Oscar, and well-deserved, buddy. So I said before, I prefer Bugs Bunny over Mickey as a mascot. Well, within Disney itself, I prefer Winnie the Pooh. He is just the sweetest little pile of fluff, and it doesn't matter how bad a day I've had, hearing his voice and seeing his face always gives me a little bit of comfort. So I was very excited I got to rewatch this for a video. As many of you have guessed, I grew up with this one, but not on its own. We had the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh on VHS, in fact I still have it, and I never knew it was a compilation film. I mean, it makes sense since the film is just a bunch of unrelated adventures, but with the framing device of the book, it felt totally natural. But while my favorite part of the film is the ending, the Blustery Day segment was always a close second, so I definitely think this was a well-deserved win. In this segment, the 100 Acre Wood experiences heavy wind one day and then flooding rains that night. The various residents have their own adventures throughout the difficult conditions, and we even get one trip-out nightmare scene. This is the longest short so far at 25 minutes, so there are quite a few side adventures going on. I won't go into all of them, but the main focus starts with Pooh helping Piglet with the wind, then meeting Tigger at night, then eventually helping Piglet again once it floods. Of those three, my absolute favorite has to be the nighttime segment where Pooh meets Tigger. Even though I love Pooh Bear, Tigger was always my favorite. Maybe I related to him because of my undiagnosed ADD. But when he comes in, it's like a whirlwind of laughs and cuteness, and then he leaves a mess in his wake, a mess which leads to the best scene by far, the nightmare. I think this and the pink elephant scene from Dumbo have become infamous for being completely out of nowhere, somewhat scary trip outs which haunt our childhood dreams. Watching it as an adult, I really see why I was scared of this as a kid, to the point where I remember always asking to skip it, which definitely makes sense because quite a few of these visuals I don't have any memory of, so I probably blocked it out. But luckily I can watch it safely now, and what in the world were they smoking to come up with this stuff? I promise I won't try it, I just want to know. It's so amazingly creative and bonkers, I just love it. The rest of the short is a series of heartwarming / adorable moments, however, when it ended, I was a little jarred. I did know going in that this was just one segment from the movie, but I really missed the rest of it. But I guess that's a good thing, because it left me wanting a lot more. Highly recommend for people of all ages for a little cuteness, a little nostalgia, and just a hint of total bonkersness. And another educational Disney short in It's Tough to Be a Bird. This lovely animated bird host takes us through a quick evolutionary lesson about how modern birds came to be, warns us about the dangers of overhunting, and teaches us a little about the bird lovers in America. I don't know what it is about these educational Disney shorts like Toot Whistle Plunk Boom and Donald and Math Magic Land, but I really like them. I think they do a great job mixing education and entertainment. This one is probably the funniest so far because there are so many visual gags throughout, and a lot of them are also very educational educational. This bit about where the term chickening out comes from, it felt right out of a horrible history sketch. And that is top tier when it comes to an educational comedy. Honestly, it feels less like a Disney product and more like something you might see on PBS Kids or even National Geographic. Actually, it does remind me of a few VHSs I had as a kid called Really Wild Animals. In those videos, an animated Earth voiced by Dudley Moore would take kids through a nature documentary while splicing up the learning with humor and songs. That's really what this feels like. A traditional nature documentary reworked to appeal to younger audiences with an animated host and additional animated segments. I also think the aspect of this cartoon which does a lot of heavy lifting in terms of being fun for kids is the narrator's voice. Richard Buckley's natural Boston accent is not typically what we hear from documentary narrators. But traditional nature documentaries are not very appealing to most kids, so taking out an educator-sounding voice and putting in a more casual one, I think does a lot to avoid alienating kids from watching this.
Now think about this. If it were not for us birds, all you people out there would not be here today.
Probably my personal favorite bit was the constant struggle the bird had when telling the audience how tough it is to be a bird. He just can't get 2 words out before being shot. The one thing I wasn't a fan of was this extremely random opera song near the end. It just felt so out of place.
Buzzards return to Hinkley Ridge.
Maybe they were mandated to have a song, but I don't think it worked. The ending also was a little different from what I had imagined because it was a little grim. I guess it was trying to call people to action into protecting the endangered bird species in the country. I don't know if this was a personal thing for whoever was in charge of Disney at the time. Maybe some executive really liked birds or possibly was part of the National Audubon Society and wanted to bring attention to their cause. Kind of like what Ted Turner did with a lot of his projects. But overall, I enjoyed this one as much, if not more, than Toot Whistle Plunk Boom. It's still not going to surpass Donald in Mathmagic Land. Nostalgia is a powerful force. But I'd say this is a great short for not just entertaining your kids, but teaching them a little something too. Is It Always Right to Be Right is a fable read by Orson Welles about a society where everyone was right all the time and admitting you were wrong was the ultimate sign of weakness. I don't think the relevance of this short can be accurately quantified. In a way, I guess it's comforting because nowadays I often feel like we are so divided more than we've ever been before. And then I see this from the early 70s and realize, oh, it was always like this. I was just younger before and didn't notice. Although it's also a little depressing since it has always been like this, so I guess this short hasn't been seen by enough people. The concept of being right is actually one I think about a lot, probably spending a lot more brainpower on it than I should, trying to consider literally every angle of an issue so I can make an informed decision, then second guessing if I did enough research to make that decision. So this short definitely spoke to me, but honestly, I don't really want to get into the subject matter that much because I don't want to attract a vicious debate in the comments which could play out exactly like in the short. How ironic. I would encourage everyone to just watch this short and really listen to what it has to say. The animation is very similar to Monroe with a simple sketchy style that often becomes inconsistent, like different animators design different segments. But I think that's probably intentional as a further magnification of the division we see literally everywhere, even in a short about division. Like I said before, watch this short, it was relevant then, and unfortunately, it's still massively relevant now. I didn't think that we could get much shorter than The Critic, but here we are at just over 2 minutes. And yeah, it's 2 minutes. There's nothing much to talk about. I'm not sure what was going on in the 70s, but I guess none of the big studios were making animated shorts. How the hell did this win? It looks like a midterm project for an intermediate 2D animation course. And is written like that. It's one joke. And yeah, it is a funny joke, but that's all it is. It's a singular setup and a singular punchline. It's only 2 minutes, so I can't say it would be a huge waste of time if you check it out, but seriously, this got an Oscar? Okay, hopefully we get a little more substance in the next year. A tale we all know so well, which is lucky because if we didn't know it, this thing would make no sense. Okay, so this is one of the, I don't know, hundreds of Christmas Carol adaptations, and I was so hopeful when I saw it was produced by animation giant Chuck Jones and directed by just as big animation giant Richard Williams. And I will say where this short shines is the visuals. Despite them being rather rough and simple, they are elegant and display some impressive camera motion. I think the standout designs are Marley and the Ghost of Christmas Future. Future is animated in such a way to appear appears so much larger than life, and his hands do a lot of work building terror for his character. Marley seems very zombie-like, with no mouth movements and just the same haunted expression with words seemingly telepathically communicated. I only wish the scene around him was properly built up so I could actually be scared. So yeah, we've come to the end of positives and have gotten to the problems, which mainly come down to one thing: the running time. Despite this being on the longer side of short films at 25 minutes, it is squeezing a typically 2-hour play into those 25 minutes, and that rush is felt. I feel like I'm watching an edited version trying to avoid YouTube copyright. Every scene is so quick, and it doesn't really end, it just stops, which makes the pacing feel so choppy and rushed, and it really just kills the atmosphere and any emotion they were trying to build. I mean, look at this moment where we see that Tiny Tim has died.
My little child. My little child.
What was that, 5 seconds? That is supposed to be the saddest scene, and we got 5 seconds. And Scrooge's big scene at the grave, maybe 30 seconds? Not enough time to get any sort of real emotion across. I'm curious if this was someone's first exposure to Christmas Carol, if they would understand what's going on. There's quite a few things I don't think are properly set up and can be only understood if you already know the material. For instance, Scrooge's girlfriend, the first time she shows up is their breakup scene, and there was not much voiceover to give context to what was going on. So while I commend the animation and the character designs, I can't see myself watching this one again or even really recommending it to a casual viewer, especially if they haven't seen a different version. I stick instead with recommending the best version ever, The Muppets. And we've reached the level of experimental films I just don't like. In Frank Film, the filmmaker Frank Morris tells his life story through a series of edited pictures. I do see what it's doing. He's telling the story in a quiet monotone, for some reason also naming all the things that pop up on the screen at the same time, and contrast that with this crazy quick editing style. But this is just not for me. It's just too abstract and feels like some of the pretentious films my classmates would make in college, and I would have to come up with nice things to say about them. So I guess I'll say it clearly took a lot of work. I can't say I've seen a life story told this way before, so props to uniqueness, but like I said, this is just not for me. If you're into experimental filmmaking, check it out, but I feel like I just wasted 8 minutes. Oh, what could have been. Closed Mondays is the one and only Oscar Will Vinton ever received. For those who don't know, Will Vinton was the founder of what would become Leica Studios after he was pushed out by the main financier, who happened to be the CEO of Nike, and replaced by said CEO's son. There's an amazing documentary about it called Clay Dream, go watch that for the full story, but before the business got messy, Will Vinton was a pioneer in the claymation game. Although he didn't invent the technique, he coined the term claymation and brought it into the mainstream with several commercials and short films, this being one of them. In this short, a drunk old man enters an art gallery and starts to see the pictures and sculptures move around, and eventually he realizes he's a lot more like the artwork than he thinks. I think there's some saying about beauty and imperfections, and that perfectly describes the animation in this short. You can see the imperfections in every frame, the fingerprints on the clay, the inconsistencies between shots, and it just makes the hundreds of hours put in so much clearer and more appreciated. I mean, look at this sculpture morphing. It's not fluid or smooth, it's very choppy. You can see the pieces of clay moved and added between frames, but it just looks like someone molding clay at lightning speed, which is amazingly cool. I will say, I'm not really sure I understand what exactly is going on. I especially don't understand the ending, but from what I saw in the documentary about this guy, that's kind of par of the course for his stuff. It's very bizarre and can take a few viewings or even longer to grasp what's going on. So if you're a fan of Coraline, Paranorman, or Kubo and the Two Strings, check out where it all started with Closed Mondays. Okay, I'm a little confused with what I just watched. I actually had to look up the Wikipedia plot summary to make sure I got this right. So this short, titled Great, is an exploration into the work of the 19th century British civil engineer and architect Isambard Kingdom Brunel. I don't know if I'm saying that right. This kind of felt like an extended horrible history sketch, but R-rated for some reason. I'm not sure if I was just in the wrong state of mind, cause I feel like something like this should be right up my alley, cause I love horrible histories, but I did not enjoy this one. I think maybe I had an aversion to the animation style. It just seemed grotesque at points. And to be honest, I wasn't that interested in the guy. This is about architecture and engineering, and that's not really my thing. So overall, I'm pretty indifferent on this one, but leaning towards not liking it. And again, it's weird because this seems like it should be right up my alley. I'm not quite sure why, but it just didn't grab my interest. I think maybe another reason was it was kind of hard to follow. Even after a rewatch, I'm still a little confused how different different scenes fit together or if the songs were of any value. This may be one where I'm just on the wrong frequency and I'm missing entirely what others like, so I'm skipping any future rewatches, but check it out for yourself and form your own opinion. I guess the animated history lessons were big in the 70s. Leisure is a look through the history of the relationship humans have to work and leisure and how they have responded to various stages. I do like this more than the previous short. I found the subject matter more interesting and also very relevant to today when work-life balance is considered a big issue. Even though the animation isn't pretty by any means, it's far from the freakishness of great. But overall, I didn't really dig this one either, mostly because this felt like a video I'm watching in an industry history class in college. I just graduated college, I don't want to go back. I think maybe the reason I like the Disney educational shorts and not these last two more adult educational shorts is that, sad to say, the Disney ones don't really make me think too deeply about the subject matter. For those, I'm just learning about music, birds, or math history, and not being presented the messed up history of work-life balance and how unequal it's always been and still is. At least that's where I thought it was going, but then at the end, it actually was a little bit more hopeful than I assumed. I think mostly because I did forget halfway through that this was from the 70s and started thinking it was a modern short, and you know if it was a modern short, the ending would be depressing as hell. So this may have been just a wrong state of mind, again, because I probably would have liked it more if it was not an issue that I am currently dealing with. So I actually would recommend checking it out if you're interested at all in what work-life balance looked like over the years. Okay, so the last decade or so hasn't exactly been blowing me away. It's been a lot of experimental and independent animation, which, hey, sometimes that can hit great, but other times it's just not for you. But I think what I was missing was a certain feeling of some of the earlier shorts, like The Old Mill. A simple experience which makes you feel like you've been on a journey. The Sandcastle brought that feeling back. This short follows a sandman in the desert building various creatures out of sand and building a home together. And that's it. No villain, not really any message, just a slice of life in this bizarre stop-motion world that is a wonder to watch. Because, oh my goodness, is this animation spectacular. Now, Closed Mondays was very impressive, but I'm sorry, how did they do this? Because this looks like real sand, which is not exactly easy to control frame by frame. Is it special stop-motion sand? Whatever it is, it's incredible. Beyond the execution of the animation, I also love the designs of these creatures. I love how they're almost recognizable as real animals, but have something obviously different, like the snake in the ball or the squid on land. The main guy in particular is just so comforting. Even though there is no dialogue, I get a very Baymaxy vibe from him. Something about his face, which even there doesn't change expression, but somehow through his movements and the clever face design, you can always tell what he's thinking. The ending as well is just perfect for this kind of story. It's not really clear what has happened, so the viewer is able to interpret for themselves. Is this a tragic tale or one of rebirth? Personally, after all the more grim shorts I've been watching for the past few entries, I'm semi-forcing myself to believe that this short is an endless cycle. Because throughout the short, as the main sand guy is shaping the rest of the creatures, it's clear they aren't exactly being sculpted, but instead unburied. Now, on my first viewing, I thought this was a necessity for the animation because the creatures themselves had to be clay and not sand, so I assumed it was meant to be a suspension of disbelief moment. But after the ending, I'm thinking maybe it was all intentional to build a loop of emerging and submerging in an endless cycle. This is such a calming and meditative short that definitely cheered me up a bit after a kind of weird day. Recommend for anyone who just needs a breather. Special Delivery is something very different than I was expecting. The first Canadian short to win? At least the first to display being of the National Film Board of Canada, and isn't it just the most Canadian cartoon you can think of? Man and wife live in cozy house in the winter, both leave for work, husband comes back early and has to dispose of a body. Wait, what? Yeah, this is similar to Monroe, where it lulls you into a false sense of kid-friendly with the newspaper comic strip art style, and then boom, dead body, boom, alcohol shots, boom, first full frontal shot in any of these shorts. Was he seriously not wearing underwear? Okay, so this short is dark, but that's kind of the overall joke. It's animated and narrated in such a bright, happy style, and that's in contrast with the plot, which is right out of a film noir. And all that can't help but make you laugh. It's just the matter-of-factness tone this narrator has, even when he's delivering completely out-of-nowhere plot turns.
Alice drove away to another province and started a new life under the name Patricia.
On a quick animation note, I know I said the style is very newspaper comic strippy, but a few of these shots, I don't know, I just love them. I find it so fascinating when hand-drawn shots zoom in and out and have weird camera angles. I don't know, maybe they're easy to do, but they just feel impressive. So dark sense of humor paired with fun and even occasionally impressive art style makes for a solid recommendation. So it seems this came from the same people as Special Delivery, as they're both from the film board in Canada. In Every Child, a baby is delivered to various houses, but no one seems to want him, so he's punted from house to house, with every house keeping him for less time than the last. This short was produced again by the National Film Board of Canada, but this time in association with UNICEF, the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund. Given the shared producers, Every Child has a very similar look to Special Delivery and shares a similar dark sense of humor, but this time with a happy ending. So yeah, this is a rather dark cartoon, given that the whole time this baby is just being punted from one house to another for incredibly trivial reasons, like it's slightly annoying, we like the dog more, or we just want to have sex. And then the short just stops giving reasons and just shoves the kid out the door. I really do like the individual scenarios this baby is dumped into, with my personal favorite being the couple who just sing opera to each other as a means of communication. And special shout out to that telephone bit where the words literally fly out of the phone. I've seen that before in comics, but I don't think I've ever seen it quite done like this in cartoons, so points for creativity. The ending is definitely cheesy, but genuinely heartwarming. Also, this may be the first short to show behind-the-scenes footage in the actual short, as it bookends with 2 shots of the voice actors, who are also the writers, doing all the voices and sound effects in the booth with a baby. It is absolutely adorable. So, like Special Delivery, a dark sense of humor paired with a heartwarming ending and a quick look inside the recording booth, I'd say it's definitely worth checking out. The Fly snatched victory in 1981. No, not the one with Jeff Goldblum, which I still have to watch. This short is the last 3 minutes of a fly's life as it enters a house, looks around, and eventually gets caught. This may be weird to say, but this is one of my favorite concepts for any of the shorts so far. POV of a fly is just so cool, and this short seems to be very true to what a fly may actually see, with several shots going 360, and a lot of stretches where the fly is going so fast you can't actually tell what's going on, but it's still clear that the path the fly is taking is all in continuity with the house that has been set up so far. That's what I'm really impressed with, the planning this must have taken to map out the fly's route from the woods to the house to the various rooms, and not once did I feel like something didn't add up. And also, it made me feel bad for a fly with that ending. That's not easy to do, but the final shot did make me go, aw. There's not much else to talk about given that this is only 3 minutes long and it's just the POV of a fly the whole time, but it's enormously creative and, like I said, one of my favorite setups for any of these animated shorts I've watched so far. Definitely check it out, it's worth your time, what little you may have left. I guess the Academy was on a Canadian kick? Crack topped the podium in 1982 and was submitted by the Canadian Broadcast Corporation. The story follows a rocking chair from creation through the rest of its life and all the memories it makes along the way. And I gotta say, I really like how these Canadians animate. It's not super polished like Disney, but these backgrounds are absolutely beautiful and I love the way the camera moves. It seriously looks like the camera movements in a CGI film. It's so cool. And I know I just mentioned it, but look at these backgrounds. But regarding the story, I know stories like this have been done before, the inanimate object observes as years go by type of stories, but somehow I always latch on to them, especially when it's done through a silent medium. This one in particular reminded me of a book I read growing up, which recently became a film, Robot Dreams. In that one, a robot is accidentally left on a beach and has to wait until the summer for his owner to come back for him. In that time, he can't move or speak, so he dreams, and while the chair in this doesn't have fantasies throughout the whole special, they do show up occasionally. My favorite part by far was when the little boy is playing on the chair and it becomes what the boy imagines it to be. And a close second has to be when all the kids at the art museum are way more interested in the chair than the modern art around them. That is so funny and so adorable. If you like having your heart warmed, give this one a watch. Tango, I'm guessing the first Polish short to win, took the Oscar in 1983. This does appear to be a passion project as it was written, produced, and directed by one guy with his wife taking over editing. The short is one still shot of a room which slowly fills up with several people in various time loops. So I'm not very informed on animation techniques, but it seems like this is a form of stop motion just with pictures of real people. So regular 2D animation just with photographs and not hand-drawn characters. Given that it's written, directed, produced by one person, it does seem to be a singular vision, and it's a vision I'm impressed with but not really entertained by. But I don't think it's really meant to entertain. It's an artistic expression experimental film. And like many other more experimental shorts we've watched so far, sometimes they hit with me and sometimes they don't. In this case, I'm glad I watched it, and I'm really impressed by the amount of time and effort this one guy put in, as well as the insane timing and continuity. That is what kept me somewhat interested the whole time, was trying to follow all the new occupants of the room while still keeping an eye on the old ones. Of course, I lost track very quickly, maybe 5 people in, so you can imagine how much of a headache it was for this guy who had to shoot and animate this whole thing. The few minutes you've seen here should give you a basic idea of whether or not you like it. For me, I'm glad I watched it, but it was a one-time thing. A Sunday in New York is a sort of Weird Al-esque claymation music video featuring a caricature of then Mayor Ed Koch singing a modified version of New York, New York, and dancing through various city landscapes. Okay, so full disclosure, I have very little context for this. While I have visited New York City, I typically have spent less than a day there and spent most of the time trying to ignore everything until I get to whatever show my aunt was taking me to. So I don't know much about the city except for the really famous landmarks, and I'm quite ignorant on the culture and history. Like, I wouldn't have known who this guy was parodying unless I looked it up, and I have no clue if this parody makes sense or what exactly is being mocked aside from a kind of annoying voice. Basically, I have no context for if this accurately portrays New York, so I can just judge it on its own merit. And on its own merit, yeah, I liked it. We haven't had a musical short in a while. Despite it not exactly being sung well, it's cool to see. The over-exaggerated character designs I'm not a huge fan of. They remind me a little of the character designs in Great, so a little grotesque, but obviously any form of claymation is still wildly impressive just for existing. In terms of the content that I can judge without the context, I found it overall pretty funny. Like I said at the beginning, it's sort of a Weird Al song, but with only a few lyric changes. I'll be honest, I don't actually know the real lyrics to New York, New York, but I'm guessing this was not in the original song.
These gridlock blues, for instance, are currently being investigated by a specially appointed commission of handpicked delegates sympathetic to the legislative parameters of the situation. In old New York.
That was definitely my favorite bit. So overall, I did enjoy it, but I feel like someone who's actually from New York would get a lot more out of it than me. So if you're a true New Yorker, check it out and let me know what I missed. If not, I don't know, do what you want. And Canada takes the trophy back from New York with Charade, which shows 2 men playing charades while 2 off-screen voices try to guess what they're miming. So the main joke of this one is that one of the men is using several props and literally shape-shifting, making the subject extremely obvious, but the off-screen voices just can't get it, and the other man does basically nothing and the voices get it immediately. And while it is just those 2 jokes done a few times, it's still quite funny and does build in waves of how obvious the film is and how ridiculously wrong the guesses are.
One flew over the cuckoo's
I know it.
Then for the other joke, how simple the movements are and how difficult the answers are.
Don Lawrence of Arabia.
I enjoyed this one. The animation is quite simple. Once again, this seems to be one person's singular vision with the same guy writing, producing, directing, and voicing all the characters, so I was just hoping it wouldn't be super experimental and artsy. And I was pleasantly surprised. It was just funny. It's on the shorter side at 4 minutes, so if you got a sec and need a laugh, I say check it out. A Norwegian film claims victory in 1986. Anna and Bella shows 2 elderly sisters looking back on their lives through old photographs, the highs and the lows. The last one was funny, and this one is really sweet. It's actually one that I could see being released now. The subject matter seems very modern, almost akin to a Pixar short. You know, the ones that make you cry, but also are very heartwarming. The animation style even seemed to take on a bit of a Disney vibe, mostly in the facial features. In fact, a Disney character even makes a cameo appearance. Of course, the overall animation style is much less polished than Disney. It almost seems like this would be the animation layouts and storyboards for a Disney film. But I don't know, something about seeing the sketch lines makes the animation feel so real to me. In terms of the story, for the first few photographs, I kind of thought that the whole thing would just be happy memories, which I would have been fine with, but then a man comes along into the picture and we see the lowest points these sisters probably had, and this whole scene is pretty intense. I love the flexible reality of this animation as it goes from real world to emotional world in the blink of an eye, eye, and it's incredibly effective at building tension and visually representing the character's emotions since, like so many of these, it is absent of any dialogue. I was a little nervous that the sisters would get mad at each other in the present day from remembering their past with the man, so I was relieved when after the memory recedes, all the one sister can do is hug the other and be happy she survived. At least for a little longer. That was an unexpected but completely plausible twist around what happens after they finish looking at the photos. And it definitely made me go, aww. If you like the Pixar and Disney shorts, you'll definitely like this one, so give it a watch. A Belgian film won the day in 1987 for a short about 3 statue women holding up a crumbling temple. Okay, right off the bat, these backgrounds are absolutely gorgeous, or at least the first 2 are, and then it's very generic sky background. But those first 2 were incredible, which is in serious contrast with the character designs that popped up next, which are quite hideous, which is also probably the point. It almost looks like Ed, Edd and Eddy. I haven't really seen the show apart from the bumpers, but I'm pretty sure the point of the cartoon was not to be pretty, but exaggerated. It's just a style I don't personally love. So that's the animation, but what about the story? Well, I already summarized it. It's just these 3 statue ladies holding up a temple and eventually it crumbles. I guess it lives up to its name in being a Greek tragedy in that it's inevitably going to end in disaster, but with a twist that the statues do manage to get up from their big fall and dance off happily into the sunset. So this was one of the first ones where I really looked at the other shorts nominated that year, and I'm a little mystified how this one won. I mean, it's mildly funny, but I'm not seeing much artistic value in it, and the other 2 shorts appear to be quite a lot better in both the animation and story department. After watching both, I would give it to the frog, the dog, and the devil. I don't know, maybe the old horny men just liked seeing naked ladies, although I'm not sure how these ladies would turn someone on, but regardless, I'm pretty miffed about how this took the trophy. So yeah, I'm definitely not recommending this one, but I will recommend both The Losers, as one is the first Pixar short ever nominated, and the other is a million times more artistically and narratively pleasing than whatever this is. And we ping-pong right back to Canada with The Man Who Planted Trees, based on the short story of the same name. This short, narrated by the late great Christopher Plummer, follows a traveler who, while walking through the Alps, comes across a village in a stretch of barren lands where nothing seems to grow. He meets a shepherd who has spent years planting thousands of trees, which eventually, after several decades, grow into a forest which the rest of the world takes as a naturally occurring miracle. Man, when was the last time we got a full narrative story? I guess Christmas Carol, so about 15 years ago. Since a proper 3-act story is not one we see often in these shorts, let's dive into that first. This was an absolutely beautifully told story. I assume the book is just as magical, and it sort of seems like a French version of Johnny Appleseed, just the guy plants all the trees in one place. But there's still the underlying theme of his act spreading joy and prosperity throughout the land where he plants his trees. Unlike Johnny Appleseed, this is told from the perspective of an outsider, and that is a type of story I love to experience. The wandering traveler happening upon an unusual stranger who is leading a seemingly simple but groundbreakingly fulfilling life. And while the story isn't exactly hard to predict, I wasn't expecting it to ground itself in reality as much as it did. And it did that by including World War I. The inclusion of the war sets it firmly in the real world, and while there is an overwhelming sense of magic surrounding the forest, it's made clear that this is all the work of a single man and his never-ending perseverance against an impossible task. So yeah, the story's great, almost like a fable, but it grounds itself in reality. What about the animation? Well, absolutely perfect for this story. It's not clean and polished like Disney, but still visually beautiful. Every single frame is 100% hand-drawn, no fancy machines, and often not even a solid background for more than a few frames. I'm not sure if this is a specific style of animation with a name, but when I see it, I always think of a candle flame. Cause while it does hold its shape, that shape can waver and move around without warning, and I don't know, that's just how these sketches feel to me. They feel like I'm watching a scene in a bonfire that's semi-solid but also flickering and wavering with every little breeze. Also, it's not afraid to go over the top bonkers in this film's version of a Disney trip-out scene. It's barely a minute long, but oh my goodness, does that minute stay with you. And beyond just the outlines, the color in this is so expertly utilized. It takes a while for anything other than shades of gray and a little brown to show up, but when it does, it's in the perfect quantities and at the perfect time. Of course, it's used to even better visually represent the rebirth of the land from a desert into a blooming valley, and by the time we near the end, I swear I'm looking at a Monet painting with how beautiful the color is. That was a complete 180 from the previous year, and I'm so glad I got to watch it. Read the book and watch the film because it is 100% worth it. The first Pixar short to ever win, and the first 3D short to ever win, and, well, the second one definitely shows. Tin Toy follows a tin toy as he tries to escape this demon baby. Okay, so like I said, this definitely looks like an early CGI film. The main toy looks great because his design really suits the 3D world with simple shapes and not much texture on his face or body. The baby, on the other hand, well, I get why those other toys were scared, but for something like this, you do really gotta think of the bigger picture. This short got Pixar the funding to make Toy Story, and the rest is history. It led to this giant in the animation game that has created some of the greatest animated films of all time. So let's put aside what the baby looks like for now and focus on the story, which I think is pretty darn great. It's a very simple concept of little thing running from big thing, but where it sets itself apart is the twist ending. Well, maybe it's not a twist, but it doesn't go how you might think a short like this, particularly a Pixar short, would go. What's Pixar known for? Tugging at the heartstrings with big emotional endings. This sets the groundwork for a big emotional ending with the baby finally playing with the toy, and the expectation would be that the other toy sees that it's not so bad and come out to play as well. Instead, it's a big anticlimax with the baby losing interest after a few seconds and preferring to play with the box and bag instead. That is just an amazingly not cinematic but incredibly realistic ending, which did get a pretty big laugh when it happened. And then just to add on, the toy getting angry and becoming the chaser instead of the chased. Perfection. I know this short is remembered a lot for the demon baby, but the story is actually very cute with a surprisingly funny conclusion. So if you can look past the clearly dated effects, definitely check this one out. Balance enters the new decade with a win, and my goodness was this one very German. So this one opens on a platform placed high in the clouds with 5 identical figures keeping the platform in balance, but when a mysterious musical box arrives on the platform, tensions start to rise and their world becomes unbalanced. So this one is a surreal, expressionistic piece which turns out was commissioned by a German synth pop band to accompany a new song. I'm not quite sure I get it, because there's not really any music in this short, but it is an interesting reason that this short was made. Just from the description, you can probably guess that this is a metaphor for many things, but the main lesson being around the importance of keeping everything in balance. Your life, the country, the world, everything needs to be in balance, and when just one element of a balanced object breaks from the balance, everything can topple. I do really like this message, and I think it was delivered in a very creative and still obvious way. I mean, it's showing the idea of balance in the literal sense, with non-human figures representing the many moving parts which are needed to keep anything steady. I'm not sure I can even dive into the many layers and meanings you could glean from this short. I've got at least a dozen buzzing around my head, but that would take all day to get through, so let's explore just a few layers while looking at the animation. Now, the animation, I think, has the exact right look and feel. It is a sort of uncanny valley with human shapes and human movements, but hollow, empty faces and stark white skin. It's almost reminding me of the Silence from Doctor Who. So at first, I'm not really sure whether or not to be scared of these things. Eventually, their personalities do come through, at least for a few of them. 55, the one to bring the box onto the platform, is more curious than the others and will allow some unbalance to find the answers, but not to the point of collapse. 75 is more cautious, wanting to get rid of the alien object which has thrown off their normal balance. And 23 is just a dick. Okay, that's oversimplifying it. He, I'm just gonna say he because it's easy, is eager to accept the box onto the platform, and when he learns only one of them can experience the music at one time, because everyone else needs to act as a counterbalance, he decides he wants it all for himself. His plan, while reckless, is quite smart. He knows the others will try to keep the balance for as long as they can, so he becomes the main causer of the unbalance, which forces them to desperately overcompensate, while he literally sits on his butt and watches the chaos. But once the rest of the group is gone, he is now the sole counterweight and cannot experience the music ever again without falling into the abyss himself. So I guess how I interpret this is that 55 represents the people in the world who take and take to the detriment of others, to the point that those others can no longer live off of what they have left, and eventually all that remains is the one who took all to begin with. But once everything is taken, there is no one left to make up for mistakes or selfish actions, so they are left alone with nothing. That's probably the most obvious interpretation someone can think of, but it's what came to my mind after a few minutes of thought. And I'm excited to watch it a few more times and dig even deeper. I really enjoyed this one, and it also really made me think, so if you're up for a surreal metaphorical experience, then give this one a watch. In In 1991, the British claymation studio Aardman, best known for Wallace and Gromit, won their first Academy Award. So I guess this short used a similar technique to Moonbird. Yeah, remember that one? All the way back in the 60s, or about 40 minutes ago. In that one, they used non-actors' conversations, in their case children, and animated around their adventure to bring their imaginations to life. Well, here we're not going for adorably artistic, it's all about comedy. So we've got man-on-the-street style interviews coming out of various zoo animals' mouths, and yeah, it's very funny. Actually, it's one of the first of these shorts that my dad laughed at. And he hasn't laughed at a single one so far. Anyway, like I said, this short shows various zoo animals, including a turtle, puma, gorilla, and family of polar bears, all talking about their living situations, but it's clear the dialogue is taken from real-life, unscripted interviews. The deadpans of these real-life people coming out of these colorful characters, and the real-world humdrumness coming out of zoo animals, for some reason, it's just so funny. My definite favorite has to be this puma. I love when he's finally had enough and just covers his face, like you know the guy did in real life. And how obviously depressed this gorilla is. Just great. So the content is funny, and we have some great Aardman animation. Now I must once again have a shameful confession. I have never seen anything Wallace and Gromit. I'm going to watch it all very soon and maybe even do a video on it, but I just never watched it as a kid, mainly because the only DVD the library had was The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, and I thought it looked really scary. But even though I haven't seen Wallace and Gromit or Chicken Run, again, sorry, I have seen one Aardman film, Early Man, which I absolutely adored. And that is one of their later works, so it's got much smoother animation than this one does. So I guess I watched the How's It Going first, and now I'm watching the How It Started. And How It Started was pretty simple, clearly saving money on the script by having it be improvised by non-actors and only having limited movements, which added to the jokes. I really enjoyed this one, but it gets an extra special honor of receiving the official Dad Seal of Approval. So if that holds any value to you, then check it out. And back to the one-man art shows in 1992 with Manipulation. This short was written, produced, and directed by one guy, Daniel Greaves. The story follows the creation of a live-action animator, a little sketched man, who starts to grow tired of his creator constantly torturing him. Out of all the shorts I've seen so far, this one felt the most like a flip book, which does make sense given the whole concept of a cartoon character gaining sentience and exploring the world of the page while the artist is just a dick to him. That is what elevated the animation for this. It's the interaction between, I think, the live-action stop-motion artist and the animated character. But here's where the short falls short for me. Get it? The whole time I was watching this, I was just kind of thinking about another short which did the whole artist torturing art a lot better, and that was Duck Amuck. In that short, Daffy is the one being tormented, and we don't see till the end that Bugs is the artist behind said torment. That short is pretty much perfect. Every joke golden, every line perfectly written, and the animation stellar. I can't help but compare the two because it's basically the same concept and even follows some of the same beats. This moment where the little man starts getting angry, all I could hear in my head was,
And I've never been so humiliated in all my life!
What did eventually set it apart for me was the ending. I thought the man entering the 3D world was very clever, but I wished there was a little more done with it besides just being thrown away. Maybe there could have been more build-up or him getting ready to finally take on this huge monster in the real world only to be quickly defeated and thrown into the trash instead of just standing up, falling, and immediately going into the wastebasket. So overall it was okay, but I've seen this idea done absolutely perfectly, so maybe check this out for the impressive timing and the unique ending, but for a better time, see Duck Amuck. And another one-man artist project, one-woman artist project. Hey, nice going, girls. Mona Lisa Descending a Staircase grabbed gold in 1993 with a short that showcased several famous works of art morphing into one another using 2D claymation. So this is pretty much a slideshow of famous paintings, but with occasional movement and cool transitions. So yeah, not really any story, but it is pretty, and these transitions are very smooth. Although I assumed it was all oil paintings, the clay does make a lot more sense from a budgetary standpoint. But even so, it's incredibly impressive how smooth these morphs from painting to painting are. It really does look like they are just melting into each other. Now on a different note, I need to mention again how uncultured I am, and while I do love going to art museums, mostly because they are big rooms that are usually empty with pretty things on the walls, I don't really know my famous paintings. So while I recognize some Picasso here, some Van Gogh there, and of course the Mona Lisa, I didn't know most of these paintings. But that does make me appreciate this one, because it introduced me to quite a few new artists I probably would have never heard of, and in an interesting and concise way. And yeah, I think there's a lot of value there. It's not just a boring slideshow, it's its own artistic piece, which also happens to introduce the viewer to many other worthwhile artistic pieces. So if that's something that interests you, check it out. If not, well, that's your choice. We got a little taste of Aardman with Creature Comforts, and now we're fully into it with the first Wallace and Gromit Oscar. The Wrong Trousers sees Wallace and Gromit taking in a penguin renter who makes a lot of changes that Gromit is not happy about, and he may even have some devious ulterior motives. So this is my very first Wallace and Gromit cartoon, and I'll say at first I wasn't really feeling it, mainly because of the setup. I'm just not a big fan of the annoying house guest, or in this case annoying renter, who comes in and it's a big nightmare to have around. Also not a fan of the new person comes into an established group and changes everything for the worse, but one person in the group can't see it. And that's pretty much the entire setup for this short. So for the first half, I just wasn't having a great time, but thank goodness around the halfway mark, everything turns around and it becomes a heist. As soon as the penguin was revealed to be actually evil, I was 100% on board, and the cartoon really picked up the pace and the laughs. Feathers McGraw is an amazing villain. I love how even though his facial expressions never change, I mean he pretty much has no facial expressions whatsoever, you can always tell something is off about him. And then when he goes full evil, his blank stares become actually intimidating, especially when he pulls a gun. I was not expecting that. Regarding the main characters, like the plot itself, I wasn't feeling them until the midpoint. Wallace honestly came across as not a great friend to Gromit. I mean, he didn't seem malicious, but he also didn't seem to be caring enough, given how great a friend Gromit was. Gromit also, I kept wishing would just stand up for himself. But again, all that changed at the midpoint, and especially went out the door for the climax. Oh my goodness, this climax. So we actually already had a climax worth seeing with the jewel heist, but it just got better with the train. I absolutely love this thing. And I love the overall joke that this is presented like a real train scene, but it's just a model set. They could just get off, but no, this thing goes at 100 miles an hour around an impossibly big house. Seriously, how many rooms did this thing go through during this chase? And seemingly never run out of places to go, except for when the tracks do run out, and this joke was so perfect. I love this whole sequence and can't even begin to imagine how long it took to animate. Seriously, these guys are masters at what they do. So yeah, my first Wallace and Gromit experience, a little rocky at first, but it got on the right track and ended with an amazingly fun action scene. Highly recommend, but stick with it for the first half because it does get better. Well, the Canadians and the Brits have been on a roll with this category, so why not team up? Bob's Birthday was the result of a collaboration between the two countries' film boards and won the trophy in 1995. So this one made me uncomfortable, but that was the point. The story follows Bob on his 40th birthday as he returns home from work and gets ready for a dinner with his wife, and has a half-naked midlife crisis in the living room, not knowing all his friends are hiding behind the couches and curtains waiting to surprise him. So this comedic scenario is built on an overwhelming awkwardness, since Bob is Winnie the Poohing it around the house while talking dirty to his wife, oblivious towards his hiding friends, who he also starts insulting as he reflects on the various things he hasn't accomplished with his life. Awkward comedy is unfortunately not my thing, but here I don't mind it as much, and I think the animation helped a lot with that. Mostly because the reason I avoid this type of awkward humor is because of how much I can relate it to real scenarios I've been in. But the animation can give that extra layer of disbelief, and these characters are designed basically like caricatures, so it's a little easier to separate myself from this world and enjoy the comedy. And when I was able to do that, yeah, it was humorous, but still quite cringe-inducing and still relatable. Even though I'm several years away from the birthday Bob is celebrating in this short, I've felt similar feelings of what am I doing with my life and how much time have I wasted. And I'm guessing a lot of other people watching this short can also relate, so while the audience is laughing, they're also sort of inwardly crying alongside the characters suffering. Both Bob and Margaret's, which let's talk about because Margaret's suffering is so much worse than Bob's. Despite Bob being the main character, she is the main bearer of the pain the birthday causes. She clearly puts so much effort into the arrangements and getting the people together, and all she can do is watch Bob obliviously tear it to pieces in front of her. And now let's talk about that ending. I had two possible endings in mind as we passed the midway point. First possibility was Margaret breaking down and revealing the guest to Bob, leading to most likely a massive meltdown. Or two, he would never find out and she would just bottle everything inside for the rest of her life. And I'm glad they went with number 2 because not only is it funnier, it's much more real, and that's also what makes it so funny. She just leaves all the party guests alone after hearing all the awful stuff she said about them behind their backs with no warning or indication of their return. Thinking of what those people must do and talk about after they leave has incredible comedic possibilities. Raise your awkwardness shields for this one, but if they're strong enough, you might just get a few decent laughs. The second Oscar for Wallace and Gromit, and third overall for Aardman. A close shave follows our man and dog pair on a mission to stop whoever is rustling up all the sheep in town, and maybe fall in love along the way. Okay, so I'm having a little trouble figuring out which one I like better, this or Wrong Trousers, because I think this one is good all the way through, but at no point matches the amazing finale of the first one. So I'll set that aside for now, and let's just talk about the best bits of this one, and for that, I've gotta say, it's the two most adorable things, this sheep and Wallace's romance. To start, Wallace and Wendy are so cute together. Maybe has a little to do with the fact that they literally have the same face, but their interactions have a very natural, awkward chemistry to the point where it's genuinely sad when she breaks things off. Of course, we know why she's doing it, and that they will eventually get back together, but yeah, it is an aw moment. But of course, no one's more perfect for Wallace than Gromit, and unfortunately, Wendy just isn't up to the challenge. I was actually glad about that. Even though they were cute together, I don't think Wallace having another major partner in his life would make sense. Reminds me of this bit from Mystery Incorporated.
Stop it, Shaggy. I'm not stupid. Are you cheating on me?
By the way, one of my favorite shows. And regarding the other major cuteness, Sean, who I believe got his own film a few years later. My goodness, is he adorable. At first, I actually thought he was going to be the villain. I guess because Feathers was cute at first, but turned out to be the villain. But nope, he's just the sweetest little thing in the sweetest little sweater. Now, like I said, no part of this short lives up to the climax of Wrong Trousers, but that's not to say this climax isn't bad. It actually goes a lot bigger with a full-on car and truck chase. But I don't know, something about the silliness of riding so fast on toy trains, that just can't be beat. So when comparing to the Wrong Trousers, I would say this one is not as good, but it's kind of like saying this is a lesser Ghibli movie. It's still a Ghibli movie. It's still going to be really good. So overall, this is another fun time with Aardman, and I'd encourage anyone to give their stuff a watch. The Germans are back with more creepy stop motion. We've got a two-man art show this time, with one guy, Tyrone, being credited as director, cinematographer, editor, and co-writer, with the other guy, Thomas, credited as co-writer, producer, animator, and distributor, with the only other name showing up under the music credit. And wow, do these guys need some Prozac. Quest follows a sandman following the sound of water through different lands of sand, stone, and steel, always falling into the next one on his search for the source of water. Yeah, this one is again very German. I'm not entirely sure what the message is. Maybe that life is just a series of plunges into worse and worse conditions on your search for happiness, and the only way you'll ever find happiness is through death. Oh yeah, by the way, that is how it ends. The Sandman finally finds the water, but can't open a hole in the steel ground fast enough before being crushed and falling through the hole as loose sand, eventually being reconstructed back in the desert where it all began. So actually, it might be a little worse, that you will only find happiness briefly in death, just too bad you'll almost be immediately reborn. Yeah, not the most uplifting of shorts, but I gotta give these guys props, especially Thomas, because if it's true that he was the sole animator on this thing, wow dude, that's a lot of work. And pretty good work. I really like the design of this Sandman. He's like the opposite of the Sandman in Sandcastle. While he was akin to Baymax, this guy is beaten, broken, and desperate. And somehow all of his emotions come through clearly through body movements and what little can be expressed through two dot eyes and an indent mouth. I don't know why, but I'm always so impressed with how much emotion can come through with the most emotionally telling part of the body, the face, almost completely eliminated. So yeah, an impressive two-man art show from some obviously existential crisis-having artists. If you are not looking for happiness, and if you just want that last little bit of hope snuffed out, this is the short for you. Number 2 Oscar for Pixar. Jerry's Game nabbed the trophy in 1998 and shows the titular Jerry playing a game of chess alongside himself in an empty park. I remember this was one of the first Pixar shorts I watched on its own without a movie to go with it. I don't remember what I thought of it, but I hope I liked it because present-day me thinks it's pretty good. Not the defining Pixar short by any means, but definitely adorably amusing. There's nothing laugh out loud here, but instead a steady stream of giggling. I think the funniest part of this is imagining what this scene looked like from the perspective of a casual observer in the park. Cause we're seeing the edited version, but what about someone who sees a guy have a heart attack, fall over, get up, and react to himself having a heart attack? I'd love to see the unedited cut. Also, Pixar animation has greatly improved. I mean, it has been 10 years and 2 Toy Stories since Tin Toy, but in animation terms, 10 years is not exactly the longest time. And Jerry is a massive improvement over Demon Baby. So yeah, this won't change your world, but it's a simple short that'll give you just the right amount of laughs. And we've got another studio first, with Sky Studios picking up their first Oscar with Bunny, the tale of an old rabbit just trying to bake a cake but is constantly annoyed by a little moth. So Sky Studios is often thought of as one of the lesser big animation companies, with most of its films not getting the best reviews, but I'll say I definitely liked a couple of them growing up. Probably my favorite was Ice Age 2. But if you watched Bunny not knowing its studio, I'm pretty sure you would not be able to tell this wasn't from Disney or Pixar. I mean, maybe Bunny looking a touch like Scrap would have been a little bit of a hint, but in terms of the animation quality and the storytelling, this is up there with some of the best Pixar and Disney shorts. That being said, I don't really like watching it because of how sad it makes me. I won't go into details, but this one hits very close to home. Not for myself, but for people and family members I am close to, and I can't help but think of them as Bunny and feel so sad and feel like I need to call them right now to see if they're okay and maybe offer to move in with them, which actually that is looking like a possibility in the future, so stay tuned for a moving vlog. But seriously, this one is very emotionally tough if you know one or more people like Bunny, and although the ending is happy, it's still just gonna add to the tears. So definitely put this one on, but have the tissues ready. A new decade brings a whole new wave of creativity, and wow, was this a good one to kick off the new millennium. My goodness gracious, this film is gorgeous! So The Old Man and the Sea, based on the Ernest Hemingway novel of the same name, follows an old fisherman who has gone 84 days without making a catch. So he ventures out and snares a giant marlin, leading to a days-long battle between man and fish. This might be the most visually impressive film I've seen so far. Every single frame of this thing was hand-painted with oil paint on glass by one man with occasional help from his son. Over 29,000 individual frames to make this 20-minute film. How the hell did he make this without going batshit insane? And how did every frame come out so consistently beautiful? Just look at it. Just look at it. I'm marveling at this incredible visual masterpiece. Oh yeah, and there's a story. Okay, yeah, so the story actually is good. It's really good. Some shades of Moby Dick in there, a little Jack London, Man vs. Nature going on. But oh my god, this animation, it's so pretty, it's amazing. And I don't want to undermine the story, because the story is actually very good and psychologically complex, with this man's journey of overcoming a curse of bad luck and living up to his deeds in the past as he ages. But it's just so gorgeous, I just want to look at it. Okay, but in all seriousness, the story is good. I'm not sure if the methods the old man is using to catch this marlin are accurate to real life, but if they are, what was so great about these marlins that you had to spend days chasing them? But actually, where I think the film has its best scene, which combined the animation and storytelling so beautifully, is after he catches the fish and the sharks come to attack. The madness and desperation that the old man slashes at the water with, using any weapon he can find, is both thrilling and heartbreaking, since we know there's no way he can protect the marlin's body against the giant swarm of sharks coming straight for them. I don't know, but something about the sort of choppy animation makes the scene feel almost dreamlike, and like the man is running on pure shaky adrenaline. Which probably he is. It's been at least 2 days since he left the mainland. So yeah, this is definitely visually one of my favorites so far, and the story isn't half bad either. Watch it immediately and prepare yourself for a visual masterpiece. The year of my birth brings us a film about the bond between father and daughter, aptly named Father and Daughter. The short opens on a father saying goodbye to his daughter and heading out into the ocean. And then the daughter grows up without him, and that's it. So I'm a little confused with this one. I guess I kept expecting answers to what exactly was going on, like a deeper meaning, but in the end, there really wasn't a deeper meaning. It was just a girl growing up without her father, and then in either death or a dream, they reconnect. So yeah, that's about it. The animation is okay. I think this one is at a bit of a disadvantage, coming right after the most stunning visual masterpiece I've ever seen, so it does feel a little underwhelming. Cause yeah, nothing much happens here. It's, I guess, meditative in a way, but I do wish it was a little more visually interesting to make up for the lack of a story with a lot of substance. Cause it's pretty much just still camera shots and sideways perspectives, nothing that really makes it stand out. So overall, there's nothing wrong with this one, there's just not a whole lot more than okay either. Number 3 Oscar for Pixar, and number 1 Pixar short for me. For the Birds opens on a group of birds landing on a telephone wire, but when a bigger bird wants to join, they do everything they can to get rid of him, not realizing the error of their ways. So yeah, this is the number 1 Pixar short for me. Not meaning my favorite, but meaning this was the very first Pixar short I ever saw. Mostly because Monsters, Inc. was the first Pixar movie I ever saw, and this was the short attached to it. So going in, there is quite a lot of nostalgia attached. I'd say this is probably the same level of quality as Gerald's Game, but I do find myself liking this one more, and I'm guessing that has a lot to do with nostalgia, cause I can't point to anything better or worse than Gerald's Game except for how the short makes me feel. And it makes me feel very nostalgic to childhood. But regarding the content of the short, I think the designs of the birds are great. They're cute, but still very easy to pin as total assholes, both to each other and to the big bird. I think that's probably why after they lose all their feathers, I still don't feel bad for them, cause technically the big bird was being kind of annoying. Not maliciously, but he was making the wire uncomfortable for everyone. But I don't feel bad for the birds after they lose because it's clear from the beginning in just their interactions with each other that they are all little dicks with feathers. I don't have much else to say. It is only 3 minutes, so not much to talk about. It's your standard funny Pixar short, and it's definitely worth a watch. What in the hell did I just watch? The Chub Chubs grabbed gold in 2003, and what the hell did I just watch? What the hell did I just watch? Okay, what's the story? This janitor works at a space bar which has a lot of very recognizable patrons and wants to be a singer but can't really sing, so he's the janitor until he electrocutes the singer and is fired, only to be warned about the incoming Chub Chubs, a race so terrifying everyone immediately leaves and he is left alone to face the incoming army and protect these little ones. Okay, once again, what the hell did I just watch? Why is the Xenomorph, Yoda, Darth Vader, E.T., the lady with 3 boobs from Total Recall, and Jar Jar Binks all in the same bar? And why does Jar Jar Binks have a British accent? Also, are these things the Langoliers? Because they look like the Langoliers. So yeah, this one just makes 0 sense. But I can't say I didn't enjoy it. The story itself is actually pretty okay on its own. It is a twist we've seen before where the cute thing turns out to actually be dangerous, and the main character, despite a sort of annoying voice, does have an adorable sincerity to him. But what is with all those weird cameos? Was Fox just like, hey, we've got the rights, might as well use them? Okay, sure, cause it is a fun time. I can confidently say I laughed pretty hard consistently. The animation is clearly not as polished as Pixar. It is giving a little bit more VeggieTales, but it doesn't really need super pretty animation because the writing is really good and very funny. So yeah, I'm definitely recommending this one. It might not look like much, but there's a whole lot of craziness waiting to be discovered. Welcome to Murphy's Law, the movie. Harvey Crumpet follows a man born in 1920s Poland who, from birth, is chronically unlucky. Everything that can go wrong does go wrong, to the point of absolute hilarity. I mean, I want to feel bad for this guy, but it really gets funny how much goes wrong for him, and granted, that is the point. The narrator has a very similar feel to Special Delivery, where the narrator says everything in such a calm and matter-of-fact tone, despite crazy dark things happening like parents being frozen, testicles getting cancer, wives dying, friends dying, just anything that can go wrong does go wrong. But getting back to the story, Harvey Crumpet grows up with a mentally disabled mother who homeschools him despite being illiterate, and a father who doesn't do much. Eventually, they both die when their house burns down and Harvey is shipped off to Australia. Due to his Tourette syndrome and a lack of any formal education, he struggles to get steady work and fit in, as well as getting his head split open and struck by lightning, leading to a magnetized head. Eventually, he does meet a nurse while getting his cancerous testicle removed, and they adopt a thalidomide baby who grows up to be a lawyer. After their daughter moved to America, Harvey's wife dies, and Harvey is eventually put into a home and develops Alzheimer's. Are you starting to see a pattern? Every other minute, something is going wrong, and Harvey is just taking it all in and keeps going. So a lot of the humor is at Harvey's expense because we're laughing at all the crap he goes through, but there is a bit of an admiring him for just getting back up and still going on day after day. And through the short, there are brief moments of levity, finding his wife, adopting their daughter, a short meeting he has with another woman in the nursing home. But I will say, this film makes you earn those happy moments. I am aware of this film company because a later film of theirs was recommended to me called Mary and Max. I never checked it out because it looked really sad, but if this is the type of sad that film has, I think I could probably take it, so maybe that's a possibility for the future. Anyway, Harvey Crumpet may be a tragedy, but it also reminds us to laugh along the way. Okay, so another short using the Moonbird concept of animating a real conversation, or in this case, an interview. Actually, I thought this may have been a rotoscoped short, but I guess it was some math animation. I'm not sure, I'm basing this off of Wikipedia. Anyway, Ryan is an animated interpretation of a real interview between director Chris Landreth and animator Ryan Larkin. This is definitely some abstract, symbolistic, experimental animation with everyone having distorted features or bits missing and filled in with something else. And emotions being represented by breakouts in the animation, like spikes coming out of their heads, or ropes wrapping themselves around the body. Overall, I do think it's interesting, but I'm not really sure I always understand it. Like, at times it does seem like they're doing weird for weird's sake, without much reason behind it. At least that's what I can see after one viewing. I'm sure the director has a meaning behind every frame. So that's the animation, but what about the story? Well, like I said, this is more of an interview about Ryan Larkin's animation career, which is very interesting to hear him talk about. He worked in animation in Canada for many years, even being nominated for an Oscar with his animated short Walking, which unfortunately lost to It's Tough to Be a Bird in 1970. However, after directing a few more projects, Ryan's life took a downward turn into drugs and alcoholism, which landed him panhandling in Montreal. And that's where the story ends. There's no big redemption arc or rise back to glory. He's still panhandling as the film fades to black. So, kind of a tragic tale. I know this review is a little bit all over the map, but my thoughts on it are a little bit all over the map. It's obviously a very personal project, and I think it does a pretty good job at getting the audience engaged, but there is still a little bit of disconnect and awkwardness. Like, I feel as if I'm listening to a personal conversation I shouldn't be hearing. But that's probably just a me thing. I think just for the technical weirdness, it's worth checking out, and you'll get to know some info on this animator. The Moon and the Sun, an imagined conversation, comes from a husband and wife duo and is, as the title suggests, an imagined conversation director and co-writer John Canemaker never had with his father before he died. The conversation consists mostly of John Sr. spilling all the family secrets and his entire life story, including mob dealings, insurance fraud, prohibition, jail time, and so much family dysfunction, and John Jr. confronting him about the abuse he put his wife and children through. Okay, so I said Ryan felt a little awkward because it was like I was listening in on a private conversation, which I shouldn't have been listening into. This also felt like that, but I don't know, somehow I didn't feel the same level of awkwardness like I did with Ryan. I can't really say why, but this one felt more like someone telling me a story and not like I was listening to someone's private conversation. Now, I will say I realize I'm very lucky that pretty much none of this short hit anywhere close to home for me, but I do know people who this would hit close to home for, and I have been audience to their entire life story, so this kind of just felt like I was back in college during a group project, and one of my classmates decided to trauma dump. Except a lot more interesting, because this one has pictures. And even though the animation is nothing special, it's sort of the home movie animation quality. Not very polished, but you can feel the heart and emotion behind every frame. But back to the story, this is a very engaging one. Like I said, it sort of felt like when my classmates would trauma dump, except this guy's story was actually insane. Like with my classmates, the most that would happen was divorced parents, or parents that should be divorced, but this one's got the mob, burning down buildings, court cases, jail time, which is not something I typically expect from a personal story. But yeah, this one's got unexpected twists and turns. I also really like the resolution, or lack thereof. There's not really forgiveness, but there is a sort of sense of letting go. I'm hopeful that this film was cathartic for the director, cause it produced a pretty great product. I guess I will warn going in, if you have a wildly dysfunctional family, this may hit too close to home, but it could also show a path to getting those feelings out through imaginary conversations. The Danish Poet nabbed gold in 2007 and is the tale of a Danish poet. Okay, there is a little more going on, so basically this guy is really depressed, so he goes to visit his favorite author to find inspiration, but on the way he meets a girl, falls in love, but she's already engaged, and they both get really sad. So going into this, probably because of the general tone of the last few films, I assumed this was going to be really depressing, but actually, it just brought me back to childhood, because it felt a lot like I had just picked up a random picture book from the library in elementary school, and this was the video version of it. Right down to one person voicing all the characters. The story has very little logic to it, like things happen and you're left thinking, this makes no sense, why would that person do that? Like the love interest promises to never cut her hair until she's reunited with the main character, and then her hair grows to Rapunzel lengths and she still refuses to cut it. Or the moment when her husband is crushed by a cow and the first thing she does is write to the main character and tell him they can finally get married. I mean, logically, that's a dick move, but this is very much an emotionally told story, not a logically told story. It does stuff our emotions want to see. The people who fall in love at first sight are meant to be, even though they hardly know each other. Doesn't matter that the husband was in an unfaithful marriage for no reason other than he wasn't the main character, and his wife spent zero time mourning him before promising herself to someone else. But don't star-crossed lovers just feel good when they just show up in stories? It is a little hard to let go of the logic, so this short is pretty middle of the road for me. But what did lift it up a little higher in my mind was the bookends. This short starts with the narration about the cosmic unlikeliness of each person's birth, and ends with the narrator revealing herself to be the child of two characters who only met because of the many specific events throughout the short, and expressing how if one little thing was different, she would not be telling the story. I just really like concepts that dive into how everything that happens is the result of millions of other little things. To an extent, of course, because if you do think about how every single thing in your life happened and try to trace it back to every single origin, your head will explode. So overall, I'm pretty mid on this one, but it does get a few extra points for the existential elements. Peter and the Wolf is a weird-ass thing. Peter is a boy who lives with his grandfather in apparently a non-verbal society who is not allowed to go out into the woods and play. One day he finally does get through the locked gate, and surprise, surprise, there was a reason the gate was locked, and that was because there's a great big wolf that swoops in and eats his pet goose while his cat and crow are left in danger, and now it's up to him to rescue them. So this is our first, I believe, ballet-based short? Not that there's any ballet in this, but it is based on a ballet of the same name, and all the music comes from said ballet. And despite not having any dancing, the music actually does match not just the mood of the scene, but sometimes specific movements, much like Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry. Now, I believe I've seen excerpts from this ballet, and I know I saw a puppet show version of it. However, I have very little memory of the plot and have no idea if this is faithful or not. I'm assuming the setting is modernized just based on the fact that the original was written in the 30s, but aside from that, this may be the most faithful or least faithful version out there for all I know. So, just judging it as its own thing, I really liked it, but it also creeped me out, and that's mainly due to the animation and lack of speech. Regarding the animation, it is very good and most of the time very smooth, almost akin to early Leica, minus one important feature, the face. All the animatronic faces are set in pretty much one almost unmovable expression, and that expression is either anger or misery. The main indicators of emotions are body movements and the eyes, which are quite expressive, especially Peter's. But the rest of the face being so still gets a little unnerving, which I do believe is the point. This isn't exactly a happy tale. I mean, Peter gets thrown into a trash can with a gun pointed to his face, and his best friend is killed in front of him. True, his best friend is a goose, but still his best friend. And now the other reason this freaked me the hell out, the lack of any dialogue. Now this is hardly the first dialogue-less short. I'd probably guess the majority of these shorts have been of the silent variety, but this one is much more grounded in reality, and the silence often feels unnatural. Like these people should be saying something in this situation, but they're just silent. I don't know, it was just very unsettling at times. Now where the lack of speech wasn't unsettling was during the quote-unquote ballet sections. Like I said, there isn't any actual ballet in this, but there are many moments which uses the original ballet's music and matches it to the actions akin to Looney Tunes. It fits very well in terms of style and mood and definitely amplifies the scenes. Now near the end of this short, I will say I thought it was a really good one, but I didn't want to watch it again anytime soon. I assumed the wolf was going to die and it was going to be really sad, but there is a bit of a twist which I really like. After Peter catches the wolf and brings him to town to sell, Peter flips the script and throws a net on the hunters before releasing the wolf into the wild after sharing a brief look of understanding. I'm sort of getting what's going on here. Peter sees himself as the wolf who was viewed as an outcast to be ridiculed and doesn't want to be the reason the wolf lives in a cage, like he feels himself to be doing, or something to that effect. It's a little half thought out. But yeah, after that little more uplifting ending, I did get some more appreciation for it, and it did become one I will probably watch a little sooner rather than later. So if you're okay with some unsettling animation mixed with just a little ballet, this is the short for you. Okay, this I believe is the first Japanese short to win, however, the title is French. I'm not entirely sure why, but this was a pretty good one, so I don't really care. La Maison en Petites Cubes, or The House of Small Cubes, follows an old man who has been building additional levels to his house for years as the water levels slowly rise, and we happen upon him one morning as it floods again and he must vacate. However, he still must make several trips back to collect his belongings, but when his pipe falls through the lower levels, he goes deeper into the depths of the house and the depths of his memories. Okay, I'll be honest, at first, I thought this was going to be an Atlantis story. When I saw all the underwater buildings, I got hyped and thought we were going to get to see some mermaids. But even though that's not what we ended up getting, I found this to be quite enjoyable. It's an old person relives life through flashbacks type story, but with the cool extra setting of underwater. This is something which did make me very curious. How did the whole town end up underwater? But that's not really the point of the short. I do love the backwardness of it. We start at the end and work our way all the way back to the beginning through the descending layers of the house until we finally reach the bottom and get the ending, or beginning. And it is one which I definitely saw coming, but still, it's a very cute moment. It's in line with other hand-drawn shorts we've seen before, definitely a unique character design with the old man, but everyone else looks pretty standard. By far my favorite moments are when he arrives in a place and the memory sort of envelops the surrounding space, so we see exactly what it looked like all those years ago. So it's a very sweet watch, very cool and unique concept with the underwater house, and a heartwarming ending. Check it out if that sounds right for you. Okay, so I'm a little confused about what I just watched. Logorama is a police comedy which turns into a disaster movie and then has an existential crisis. Oh, and every single character is a brand. And not even a fake brand, like Ronald McDonald is a criminal, the Michelin Men are cops, the Jolly Green Giant is a zookeeper, and the Pringles guy is probably a sex offender. Plus, just dozens more that I can't even begin to list. I'm really confused by what exactly this was. It honestly kind of felt like a South Park episode, along with all the hard R-ness of it. Oh yeah, this thing is very hard R. I mean, I know we've gotten R-rated shorts before, but that was mostly because of artsy nudity. This is hard R material. Swearing, nudity, violence, guns, all that stuff. Okay, so I've said I'm confused about what just happened, so let's just try to talk about it. The Michelin Men are cops chasing after Ronald McDonald, who is stealing nuclear weapons, but before they catch him, an earthquake hits and LA starts to collapse. So an SO waitress and Bob's big boy steal a cop car and drive out of the city only for oil to explode out of the ground and cause all the earth around them to crumble, leaving them alone on a tiny island. And then we zoom out and see a whole branded universe. I mean, this whole thing was very entertaining, and I do get that they're saying stuff about consumerism and brand oversaturation and stuff, but it's just a very odd plot, and I'm not quite sure I understand everything going on. But it's also one of those things which I would very much like to talk to the creators about and find out just why, how, what, everything. Very curious, how'd the idea come about? How'd you choose which mascots to have where? What did it all mean? So yeah, a very weird ride, but entertaining. If you're over 18 and like this South Park style humor, then check it out. Okay, we have arrived at the 2010s and the short which gave me the idea for this video. The Lost Thing is an Australian production based on a book of the same name and follows a young man who discovers a lost thing and tries to help it find a home. So like I said, this is the short which inspired me to make this video, and that's because I really love this thing. I found it because during COVID, I discovered an artist named Tim Minchin who I absolutely fell in love with. Seriously, go check out his stuff. He is one of the funniest, most brilliant minds working today. But deep in my search for any piece of media he was attached to, I found this, which he was absolutely perfect for. So with that love out of the way, let's talk about this short. I just love it so much. I could ramble for hours, but let's try to organize my thoughts. Okay, number one, the world building is incredible. This world feels so fleshed out and like it has thousands of years of backstory that we just haven't seen. The design of everything from the houses to the trams to the janitors are so intricately detailed, like they're supposed to be the main focus. And then the way this world works, even though I don't know the rules or even where it is, it's somewhat post-apocalyptic and a little totalitarian, but it just feels like it makes sense. Even though I don't know a thing about it, it feels absolutely established. And usually something this interesting would be in the forefront, but instead all that effort is just put in the background of this very simple yet incredible story. Number 2, the character designs. Not the humans, they're fine, but all the lost things are so creative. The main lost thing, what is it? It's like a mix between a crab and a squid stuffed inside a teapot, and I guess it eats random garden shed junk that it grinds up in its interior gears? Who thinks of this stuff? I also love the sort of subtle running joke of how the lost thing somehow fits into all these places it should not fit into. I mean, look at this shed's door. How did he fit in there? It happens a few other times and it isn't addressed, but it's there and it's a fun little Easter egg. And the creativity and character design doesn't end with it. Look at all these other lost things. This very short sequence is so packed full of imagination, I could watch it for hours just picking out every little detail. And big number 3, the story is amazing, and it's all centered around this really sweet relationship between a guy and a thing. This guy isn't a very special guy, he's kind of the prototype for average everyday, but he happens to be the one person to find this thing and happens to be the one to take care of it. Of course, there's a bunch of metaphors going on here, but the interpretation I usually come to is that the lost things represent childhood wonder. Our main guy is not fully an adult yet, which explains why he can still notice these things and others don't, and then in the end, he seems to be growing up more, so he notices them less. It's very bittersweet and does usually get me a little teary-eyed. So that's The Lost Thing, the short that gave me the idea for this whole project. Even after watching almost 80 of these shorts, it's still one of my favorites. I don't care who you are, you must watch it as soon as possible. The Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lesmore won the evening in 2012. Now, I knew nothing about this going in, but when I saw the writer credit, I got very excited. William Joyce, who also directed this short, is one of my favorite children's authors. I grew up with many of his picture books, including George Shrinks and Santa Calls, and you may know his work as the inspiration for such films as Meet the Robinsons, Rise of the Guardians, and Epic. He's an amazingly creative author, and this short shows that creativity in full spectacle. Mr. Morris Lesmore lives in a gray world until a giant storm literally blows his town away. After the storm, he comes across a woman flying up into the sky using a cloud of flying books. She sends him one of her flying books before she flies away, and it, through illustrations of Humpty Dumpty, takes him to a library where he becomes a new librarian. So this short has very clear parallels to The Wizard of Oz, with the characters starting off in a world of gray and entering a world of color. Now let's talk about that world, because it's my personal heaven. The majority of this story takes place inside a magic library where all the books are alive and have personalities. Mr. Morris spends his days feeding the books alphabet cereal, giving the books new sleeves, and even performing life-saving surgery on a particularly elderly volume. Like I said, this would be my own personal heaven. I want this job, and I want this sidekick. A book that expresses emotions through flipbook-style illustrations? I don't think I've ever seen that before. It's insanely creative. The animation is fine, it's standard 2010s 3D. Honestly, this reminds me a lot of The Lost Thing, with a similar premise of a quote-unquote normal guy discovering a world of imagination, but they are very different in terms of tone and especially ending, with a much more downer ending in The Lost Thing and a much more uplifting one here. Honestly, I think these two would make a great double feature. So if you're gonna watch The Lost Thing, watch this right after. Disney's back for the first time since the 70s, and I know technically the Pixar wins count as Disney, but this one is the first real official Disney short to win since It's Tough to Be a Bird in 1970. That's almost 40 years, people. And yeah, this was a good one to come back with. Paperman follows a young man who meets a woman briefly at a train station and feels a spark, but she leaves before he can get her number. Luckily, he sees her from his office building in the building across the street and attempts to send her messages using paper airplanes. He eventually gives up, but lo and behold, the airplanes have gained sentience and bring the two officially together. here. Very simple, not even in color, well, a little color, but mostly black and white, and yeah, very sweet, emotional storytelling. It's one of those where if you think about it for even a little bit, you think, what is this guy doing? He's kind of obsessing over this girl and throwing his job away and littering as well. But that doesn't matter because this is not for your brain, this is for your emotions, and my emotions say this is beautiful. I don't think this was the first one to do it, but this is an earlier example of blending 2D with 3D animation, and I think it's done really well. I personally just prefer straight up hand-drawn. I just like the movement better, but it's something I can easily overlook. Honestly, my favorite part of this was the sentient airplanes. I just love when a film can put so much emotion and personality into inanimate objects. Kinda like the magic carpet from Aladdin or the mops from Sorcerer's Apprentice. These planes are so playful and sassy and all without words, faces, or body language. It just somehow works. So yeah, very sweet, simple return of Disney to this category, and I'd recommend giving it a watch. Okay, thank goodness for that ending reveal because I was about to cry. Mr. Hublot took the win in 2014 and is a Luxembourgish and French collaboration. The story takes place in a sort of steampunk-esque world and follows Mr. Hublot, a man who lives a simple inventory life in a small apartment and maybe a cyborg, I'm not sure. One day he finds a robot puppy on the street and takes it in, but the puppy eventually gets too big for the apartment and Mr. Hublot needs to make a tough decision. So this is very similar to The Lost Thing again because it is a very simple, sweet story set in a bizarre futuristic world with no explanation for why it is. It just happens to be set there, and the story doesn't need to be set in these weird worlds, but it adds so much additional intrigue and room for creative designs that it elevates the shorts to, well, Oscar level. Like I said, the city design is very steampunk, but Mr. Hublot's apartment is kind of rustic steampunk, which I really dig and may become my new favorite interior design style. And it's not just great designs, it's also some very clever storytelling. Let me tell you, when he took out that screwdriver, I was not optimistic for the outcomes, especially since despite Mr. Hublot obviously being very sweet up until this point, he's a very emotionless character. So it's very difficult to get a read on him. I could see the ending working and making sense either way it went. I'm of course glad it took the happier route, but it did make me work for that happy ending, which I think made me appreciate it all the more. I would say that this one fits neatly in a triple feature with The Lost Thing and the Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lesmore. All very similar feels, looks, and themes. Put them all on and let me know what you think. Seems like Disney's back in the game in the Oscar-winning animated shorts department. Feast came out in 2015 and follows a dog who is adopted off the street and learns the joys of eating all the food he wants. Luckily, he and his owner share the same taste, but after his owner starts dating a health nut, the food goes downhill and the dog doesn't know what to do anymore. Okay, this is an example of understanding something I didn't get when I was younger, but I do get now that I'm grown up. I saw this when it came out and I really liked it. I thought it was adorable and very funny. So I thought those would still be my thoughts now. But there's one big thing I completely misinterpreted as a kid, and that was the girlfriend montage. As a kid, I thought the entire montage was over the course of 1 or 2 days, and I thought that him eating after she leaves meant that he was just resisting all day and he couldn't take it anymore. And I thought that because the whole montage, I was looking only at the dog because he was the cute one. I didn't care about these two. I was 12 and didn't understand how relationships worked. But now I finally realized this montage was probably a couple months or maybe even a year, and the relationship took a bad turn. I never noticed them sitting far apart on the couch, and that they probably had a very big fight, and that was the trigger to make him start eating junk food again. And you may wonder, well, why did you think he was so sad if she had just left for work or something? I don't know, I thought maybe he was just a hopeless romantic and the dog was really cute. That's what I was focusing on. So this was a very cool watch to realize something I totally missed as a kid that added another layer to the story. But that personal stuff aside, yeah, this one is very, very cute, and it makes me very hungry because all the food looks so good. The animation style is the same as Paperman, mixing 2D and 3D. Again, would have preferred straight 2D, but this is a fine compromise. I love how almost every shot keeps the dog's motion fluid but changes the environment. Like, he goes down for another bite of donuts and it cuts to him in the same position just on the couch and eating pizza. It makes the whole thing feel like one long montage, which, yeah, it sort of is. So, very cute, well told, and some layers I just now uncovered. All worth a solid recommendation. Bear Story was the first Chilean film to win an Oscar in any category, and also the first piece of animation from Latin America to be nominated for any Oscar. The short follows a bear who wakes up in an empty house, which clearly he shares or did share with a wife and son, and he proceeds to work out on the street, showing the animatronic show of what we assume was his life. The story shows him being taken from his family and forced to perform in the circus. However, he eventually escapes and reunites with said family. Or does he? Okay, so I'm a little confused by this ending. Is the family dead or not? Cause yeah, they show up in the animatronic show, but we never see them in real life again. Is the show just his way of coping with never seeing them again? Cause the happy ending in the animatronic show does feel very tacked on and rushed. Almost like it was just tacked on for a forced happy ending by a father unable to cope with the loss of his wife and child. And okay, maybe they're not dead, maybe they just moved out of the country or something, but I'm pretty sure they're gone. So yeah, a bit of a weird ending, because I'm not sure if it's supposed to be happy, sad, conflicting, or something else. I don't know, overall I'm just feeling kind of unsatisfied. I want an answer, were they there or not? I went through so much misery to get to the end, so I either want to be distraught or crying with happiness, but I want one of the two, not emotional confusion. That just confuses me and makes me annoyed. And probably that's the point of the short. It's up to us to come up with our own conclusion. And yeah, I often like when a film does that, leave it open to interpretation, but something about this feels like it should be an obvious answer, but it's just not. Please tell me if it is though, because I'm lost. But aside from the ending, the rest of the short is very well done. I thought the animation in the quote-unquote real world was pretty standard, but the animatronic animation within the show is incredible. I don't know why, but I kept thinking of Paddington the whole time. I will say the music is a little weird, because while it does slow down and get a little somber near the end, it's got a very happy tone throughout the beginning, even when people are being beaten and dragged away. So I just thought that was a little out of place. But aside from the music choice and that ending, which please someone explain it to me, I did enjoy this one. I think it's worth watching just for the unique animation style, and while the emotions may not be completely satisfied by the end, maybe an explanation will pop up in the comments. Pixar is back on top 19 years after its last win, and this one might just take the crown for cutest short. Piper follows a young sandpiper who is learning how to find her own food but keeps getting terrified by the incoming tide. Luckily, she finds a friend who teaches her ways to overcome her fear. So this is the first short I remember being confused by due to the animation being too good. I first saw it in theaters before Finding Dory, and during the opening few shots, I thought it was a nature documentary because the sand, water, and birds from a little ways away looked so real. When Piper did pop up, then it became clear it was animated, but that water and sand is so realistic. Congrats to the animators. So aside from impressively real animation, like I said, Piper is mind-blowingly adorable. I know birds aren't always the first animal that comes to mind when thinking of the cutest animals, but Piper is just the most adorable, lovable little featherball I've ever seen. But the short doesn't just rely on the cuteness, it's also got a great message of overcoming fears. Piper goes on a very realistic journey, getting over her fear of the waves and finding the help that she needs along the way in the form of another adorable companion. How are they making these things so cute? I almost faint with joy every time he snaps his little claws. So yeah, I keep getting distracted by the cuteness, but like I said, the story is very good too. It's just, oh my god, these things are so cute! But that's what makes this short extra commendable. They could have just done a cute display of cuteness, but they told a story which could stand on its own without the cuteness. But with the cuteness, it's even better. So extra awesome. Definitely recommend, it will easily melt your heart. Dear Basketball won in 2018 and is Kobe Bryant's ode to the game he loves but is retiring from. So I guess, elephant in the room, Kobe Bryant passed tragically in a helicopter accident in 2020, just 3 years after this film's release. This is obviously a very personal project which holds a lot of resonance for fans of Kobe, especially after his death. It tells his story in an emotionally satisfying way with some truly beautiful hand-drawn animation. It's definitely a film which fans of Kobe will adore, and I think will still resonate with those who are unaware of his legacy. I guess it's sort of like walking into the last 5 minutes of an inspirational movie. If the movie is really good, you'll still understand the message and get the gist. But it would definitely be more satisfying if you saw the whole picture. So if you're a casual knower of Kobe Bryant as a person, you'll probably still enjoy this, but if you're a fan, this is 1000% the short for you. Pixar wins twice in only 3 years with Bao, a short inspired by the real-life relationship director Domi Chi had with her mother. This short follows a woman who one day discovers a steamed bun come to life and decides to raise it as her own. They seem to have a loving relationship for many years, but after a while it becomes clear she is being so overprotective, and the bun starts to rebel, which causes the mother to resort to desperate measures. This is the type of genre I see a lot, with stories we've seen 1,000 times, in this case a mother raising a son and being overprotective, but adding some sort of twist. In this case, making him food. It's a classic story for a reason. It's quite relatable to many people's real-life experiences. And this short does a really great job portraying it in a way that still felt different enough to not feel stale. Regarding the animation, I do really like the unique designs for the family, and I absolutely loved the reveal of the son's human design. And I do appreciate that this wasn't afraid to go a little dark. I mean, she pretty much murders her son to protect him. Especially for kids who have been spending the last few minutes getting to know this bun as a real person, I'm thinking this would have scared more than a few of them. Of course, it's revealed very quickly it was all a dream, but for a good minute, that character is officially dead. So while this is not a story I can personally relate to, the story is still well told with some dark moments I really appreciated. Also, I can easily see this making my mother instantly cry. So be prepared for some heartstring tugging and give this one a watch. Hair Love starts off a new decade with a 2020 win, and like the last one, I had to break out the tissues. The story follows a young girl who wakes up on a very special day. We're not sure why it's special, but she wants her hair to look good. Unfortunately, even with her dad's help, she struggles to get the hairstyle she wants, but with a little help from an online tutorial, they get out the door in time for their special day. Oh my goodness, was this one adorable! After Bao, this was the one I needed, cause despite how good that one was, it was a little dark and actually did stick with me uncomfortably for several days. I don't know, I kept having flashbacks to the death scene and just really feeling sad, but this one will definitely leave you happy. I mean, there's sad stuff in it, but it's heavily implied that they're past the hard stuff and it's recovery time, so it's happy. I absolutely love the father-daughter relationship portrayed in this. I have very fond memories of my dad performing detangling sessions on my hair. I always dreaded when my mother was holding the brush, but when he did it, it was never painful. I also really appreciate how it's not a magical dad comes in and solves everything. He struggles. This is clearly his first rodeo, and it's not going to be easy. It literally becomes a boxing match at one point, but they manage to find the help they used to have and makes it to that special day, which did bring out the tears with that reveal, but they are most certainly happy tears. If you just want to feel happy, this is the one to watch. Okay, so you know how I said the last one made me happy? That happiness is gone. If Anything Happens, I Love You won in 2021 and made me ugly cry. So when this thing first started, I got very quickly what it was going to be about. 2 parent-aged adults looking that sad, kind of one obvious reason to think of there. But I did not expect that cause of death. Sadly, as soon as the school is revealed, it became crushingly obvious. Even talking about it now is just really making me tear up again. I don't really have much to say on this. It perfectly portrays the emotions these parents go through and does stab you through the heart with the crushing reality that doesn't need to exist. The windshield wiper took the trophy in 2022, and this one is heavy in the social commentary department, so this short shows a bunch of short scenarios all somewhat based around the question asked in the beginning, what is love? All of them are commentaries on the state of love in the modern world and the state of finding love. I found some of the vignettes to make more sense and get their point across better than others. Definitely my 2 favorites were the grocery store Tinder and the space texting ones. The former sees 2 shoppers completely absorbed in swiping Tinder, shopping in the same aisle, literally right next to each other, and eventually match with each other, but they choose to keep scrolling and never notice the other person was there. And the space texting short follows a text conversation between 2 people who clearly have different ideas about the seriousness of their relationship. I like this one because it's very easily viewed from both angles. On one hand, you feel bad for the person who just bared their soul and gets no response, but on the other hand, the receiver of that soul bearing now has the burden of said soul bearing and clearly did not have the same feelings for them, but now has had eternal love confessed to to them, and all they want to do is casually hang out. I'm not sure I quite understood how others connected to the question of love. The homeless guy with the dress was a little unclear. I'm also not quite sure what the point of the cityscape shots while we hear two people post-coital was saying, but despite some inconsistencies in tone and meaning, where this short really shines is in the animation. Every vignette is a little different in style, but still stays consistent with a similar feel. It's all very detailed, and I don't know why, but the colored lighting is really speaking to me. Apparently, the creator of this short, Alberto Milgo, also worked on Love, Death, and Robots, which I haven't seen, but here it's peak standard for modern animation. So I guess he's got some credentials to back him up. While some of the vignettes didn't quite click with me, the ones that did really stand out, and the animation is a marvel to look at. 2023 gave the Oscar to The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse, and okay, I'm happy again. This was just absolutely delightfully, amazingly heartwarming. The story, based on the book of the same name, follows a young boy who is lost. He meets a mole who wants to find a cake, a fox who doesn't speak much, and a horse who has been outcasted by his herd. Together, they continue the search for the boy's home and share wisdom with each other. So, one of my favorite movies growing up was The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, and this has major Winnie the Pooh vibes. Even a couple lines I swear are referencing it.
Doing nothing with friends is never doing nothing, is it?
No.
But what I like best is just doing nothing.
How do you do just nothing?
Well, it's when grown-ups ask, what are you going to do? And you say nothing. And then you go out and do it.
I like that. Let's do it all the time.
But it still has its own feel. It's like Winnie the Pooh mixed with Ghibli movies like Totoro or Ponyo mixed with Mr. Rogers. It's very simple, very calm, but so incredibly deep in its many messages and characters. And the animation is the perfect match for this storytelling style. It's hand-drawn and you can really tell because a lot of the times the sketch structure lines are still visible. It gives the whole film a rustic, homegrown feeling like this was handmade for the audience. And just like the animation style being a perfect match to the story, the voice acting is a perfect match to both. The voice acting is where I felt the similarities to Winnie the Pooh the most. Their classic voices are ones that you just hear and feel safe. Tom Hollander as the mole and Gabriel Byrne as the horse give the exact same comforting, safe feeling whenever they talk. Idris Elba as the fox starts out very intimidating, then gets the lonely feelings, and at the end has gotten to the safe comfort as well. And this kid, Jude Coward Nicole, is amazing. He captures the right amount of uncertainty and fear, but also kindness and want for understanding. All these elements combined into what I would describe as a near perfect short, which makes you really feel the environments. It really makes you feel cold, fear the storm, and eventually feel the warmth of the family coming together. 100% watch this as soon as possible. A well-deserved win. And now, we've come to our last short, our final step in this long journey. The finish line is right there. We just gotta watch one more, and that is War is Over, inspired by the music of John and Yoko. Unfortunately, that one more just doesn't seem to be available frickin' anywhere. It's not on any streaming service, there's no DVD, and there's no less than legal link to download it. It's just nowhere. The only thing I found was a link to a theater playing all the nominated shorts, but they're currently playing all the 2025 nominees, so I guess I'm about a year late. I was so close, and they just couldn't give it to me. You had to rip that finish line away. Well, I set out to review 93 shorts, and I'm going to. I took a look at those will win, should win lists for the 2024 Oscars, and pretty much all of them said War is Over will win, Pachyderm should win. So we're just gonna watch and review Pachyderm and pretend that one. Back to the show. Okay, so I had to watch this one like 3 times to understand what was going on, but when it did finally hit me on that third viewing, wow, I'm depressed again. Pachyderm is a memory of a young girl's summer with her grandparents, specifically spending time with her grandfather, and how she remembers the trauma of the summer. I'll leave you to watch the short for yourself and find out what that trauma is, but it's heavy, so be warned. The storytelling of Pachyderm did remind me a lot of Room. The book, I haven't seen the movie. In that, it's the description of an event from the perspective of a child. So they may describe something that they don't quite quite understand, but the adults understand and are horrified. Although it did take me a minute to get it, but once I did, I was sufficiently horrified. For the first 2/3 of this thing, it seems like a very nice grandfather-granddaughter relationship, but they keep putting in these weird moments that just feel out of place and kind of wrong. And then the reveal happens, and I'm like, yeah, that all has a completely new meaning now. It's very subtle in planting all these seeds to later pay off with the reveal, so subtle that I didn't even notice that there was a reveal until a few viewings in. And maybe it was the translation I watched wasn't very good, maybe it's more obvious in French, I don't know, but it's very subtle. I thought the animation was a perfect design choice for the story and feelings. It's very dreamlike and fluid, much like how they would look in this woman's head as she remembers it. So it took a while, but when I finally got the big picture, I did realize how incredibly genius this film is, and I do recommend it, but I'll preface with a trigger warning, cause it's quite dark. And that was every single Oscar-winning animated short. Wow, that was an interesting run. I don't think I ever would have watched most of those without doing this video, but I'm glad I did. While there were a couple of duds in there, for the most part, quality across the board was quite high, and many absolutely blew me away. I'd actually recommend binging them all in one big marathon if you're an animation buff. But for those who don't want to dedicate several hours to shorts, here's my quick top 15. Number 15, The Critic. Short, sweet, and a whole lot of laughs by the legendary Mel Brooks. Number 14, Balance. An unsettling look at what happens when a chunk of society gets too power hungry. Number 13, Peter and the Wolf. An incredible adaptation of the ballet, and in my opinion, actually improves the ending. Number 12, Quest. A tragic cycle of a tragic life. Number 11, The Sandcastle, a less tragic cycle of a pretty heartwarming couple of lives. Number 10, The Old Mill, a Fantasia-like experience where you feel like you've been through the storm right along with the animals. Number 9, The Wrong Trousers. After a few more rewatches, this really grew on me. Some great build-up, an amazing villain, and an incredibly funny climax. Number 8, Piper. Animation so good you'll think it's real, and so adorable your heart will melt. Number 7, Mouse Trouble. By far the funniest of the classic studio shorts, every joke hits an absolute bullseye. Number 6, The Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lesmore. Imagination on steroids. If you love books, this is like watching your dreams come to life. Number 5, The Man Who Planted Trees. An incredible experience. Every frame is right out of a sketchbook, and the will of the title man is something to behold. Number 4, The Old Man and the Sea. I'm in awe of this feat of animation. In every single frame, you can feel the hours of dedication and the years of work two men spent making this masterpiece. Number 3, Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day. I can't help it, nostalgia is a powerful thing, but even without it, this is an easy, comforting, and overall just awesome short. Number 2, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. I kind of don't have the words for how much this blew me away. It feels just like reading a book from childhood, and everything about it is perfectly done. And number 1, The Lost Thing. Yeah, I know this probably isn't the best one on this list, but it's my favorite. It gave me the idea for the video, it's narrated by an absolute genius, and it's just incredible. So there you have it, every Oscar-winning animated short and my top 15 recommendations. It's been one hell of a ride, and if you liked it, I welcome you to like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. What's your favorite Oscar-winning short, or what's your favorite animated short in general? Are there other animated shorts I should check out that didn't win? Did some of these not deserve to win? I actually do know the answer to that. Definitely yes. But that's about it for this episode of The Uncultured Nerd Show. Thank you so much to all my fellow freaks for watching, and I'll see you next time with something else. See y'all later!